This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate what if Naruto takes Sasuke's eyes and travel back in time. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
The night sky was filled with menacing flashes of lightning. Two men stood looking at one another without averting their eyes. Despite the rain pelting them, the yellow and red eyes remained fixed on each other. The surrounding area had been abandoned, concealing all of its former splendor and beauty. As the rains extinguished the fires, all that was left was rubble and ash. It appears that both young men have nearly reached their breaking point. Both men were covered in wounds. Naruto's right eye was cut by a kunai, rendering him blind in that eye, and Sasuke's left arm was broken and dangling helplessly at his side. At last, the young man with the blue eyes and blonde hair smiled, but it was not his typical happy smile. Rather, it was a smile filled with sorrow, pain, and regret. "Why bother?" Sasuke said in a venomous voice. "I'm going to kill you and then I'll destroy the village that gained so much from my pain, from Itachi's pain." Naruto returned to his stance, prepared to end the fight. "You know you are still my best friend, but I can't let you do that, and that is why I will be the one to end this," he said. Naruto switched back to the Sage mode after one of his shadow clones disappeared. Knowing that this would be the final fight, Sasuke prepared himself for the next assault. Sasuke was aware that, even in the most dire circumstances, Naruto always had one more trick up his sleeve. Sasuke, however, wasn't going to give Naruto a chance, so he charged with a lightning-covered hand and hit Naruto in the chest. However, Naruto grabbed his arm and prevented him from escaping. Naruto smirked as blood trickled down his lips. "Goodbye Sasuke," Naruto said, still in shock that he still had to battle Sasuke after everything they had been through. Sasuke still wanted him dead after all the fighting so that everything they had worked so hard to defend could be destroyed. He didn't want to believe it and couldn't believe it. He only had enough for one final blow, and it appears that Sasuke did too. When Sasuke charged his Chidori and the two shinobi charged each other with their eyes fixed on each other, he pumped the last of his chakra into his Rasengan, but it wasn't his typical Rasengan. Rather, it was one that Sasuke hadn't yet seen. He hoped this would be enough to turn the tide in his favor. When the two jutsu collided, a dazzling light was produced, and the two shinobi were blasted apart. When Naruto stood up again, he tore a sharp fragment of rock from his left eye, which was gushing blood. His right eye landed on Sasuke, who was lying on the ground with a portion of his chest missing and his right arm missing. "How do you do it, Naruto? Fight for people that you hated. How can you fight for those who hate you?" Sasuke said weakly. "I do it so they will see me as something more than a monster. I don't fight for the ones who hate me. I fight for my friends, for my comrades. I would do anything for them. I would have done anything for you," he said with seriousness, but something occurred that Sasuke not anticipate. Naruto grinned. "I know I told you that I would die with you. That will have to wait. There is still one more thing I need to take care of, then I promise that I will meet you again." "What are you going to do? Become Hokage? The man who killed the treacherous Uchiha," he murmured. "No, I am not fit to become Hokage. I couldn't even save you, so how can I protect a village?" Smiled, he replied, "I have to release the jutsu." Sasuke grinned and remarked, "Dobi, you truly are a moron." "I guess some things never change," Naruto remarked, grinning down at his friend who had died. He made a hand gesture to release the jutsu as his eyes landed on the tree. He couldn't believe he had led them down as the pods opened and his eyes opened in horror. Naruto. "Kun," he said, looking at Hinata. Already, she was starting to transform into a Zetsu. He approached her and put his right hand on her chest, but it was ineffective because he lacked the chakra and could not undo the effects of the jutsu. Regardless of how many times he tried, it never worked. He sensed someone touching his cheek. "It's okay, Naruto." "Kun," she said with a gentle smile as he looked into her face. "I will find a way to change you back. I will figure something out." She said quietly, "It's okay, Naruto. Kun, will you do me a favor?" While stroking her cheek, he questioned, "What?" She said, "I don't want to live like this," to the same gentle tone. Naruto said, "You won't have to. I will find something that will change you back," but he could see that she was still gradually changing as he observed her. She reached up and gently wiped the tears that were streaming down his cheeks. Naruto closed his eye and said, "Please, Naruto, don't let me turn into one of those things." "I can't," he kissed her as the truth. Seeking ball struck her in the chest. "Please, Naruto. Kun, I love you, and if you feel anything at all for me, please do this for me," he said, forming a tiny black orb in his hand. As she passed away, he held her close. "Naruto," he heard a hand on his shoulder and a whisper behind him. "Naruto, let's leave." He looked over at Sakura. Naruto, do what to change all of this? Make it so none of this happened? Do you want to save your friends? Kurama inquired. How can I? Inquired Naruto. Naruto didn't want to believe it, but he knew in his heart that Kurama was correct when he said, it's easy with the Rinnegan. I can't promise what will happen, but what do you have left to lose? All your friends will be the same as the Hyuga girl, and by the time we figure out how to reverse the jutsu it will be too late to save any of them. What is the catch? Well, if we change the course of history, who knows, but there is one thing I am sure of: we will take the place of either you or. After saying, or place, yours, Naruto asked, can I save my family? Yes, Kurama replied plainly, but you'll need the other chakra to help you. My chakra won't be sufficient. Will you help me? Naruto asked the other Biju, and they all nodded. They began to infuse him with chakra. Naruto grinned and said, then what are you waiting for, you overgrown furball? His eye began to spin wildly, and he felt as though he was being torn from his body. The pain was almost intolerable, and the events of his life flashed before him before everything turned black. It felt like it was being split in two. A young boy opened his eyes and sat up, holding his head, as the sky was filled with dark clouds, rain, and lightning. Kurama, where are we? He asked, but no one responded. He called out again, Kurama, but got no response. He grasped the chakra of the Kyuubi. With haste, he hurried off toward his friend. As he ran, his mind was racing with so many ideas. The first was the reason he was so slow, and the second was how Kurama was freed from him while still alive. His strides were also much smaller, and he glanced down at his tiny hands. He found a river and slowed down. He looked down at his reflection and saw that he was only 4 years old, with a Mangekyo Sharingan in his left eye and Sasuke's Rinnegan in his right. He glanced down at his palms, which were covered in tattoos of the Indra and Asura symbols. As he sat down to reflect, 5 clones materialized next to him, and he sent them off to investigate. His last memory was of his battle with Sasuke, but he was unsure of the outcome, so panicking would not help him. He had 2 conclusions after retrieving the memories from his clone at dusk. Either he had been transported to a different dimension, or he had been transported back in time, and his presence had changed the course of events. Kakashi Sensei, who always seemed to know the answers, would be aware of what was happening if he were present. Though he wasn't sure if he was Minato's son anymore, he knew one thing. It wouldn't be good if he walked around looking so much like him. Thus, he lost the whisker marks and used a quick transformation jutsu to give him brown hair. In order to save chakra, he closed his right eye. Unlike Kakashi, who had been unable to deactivate his Sharingan, it appeared that he could activate and deactivate the Sharingan in his left eye. He had no idea how much strain it would put on his new body, so he would need as much chakra as he could spare. After taking a deep breath, he stood up and simply began to walk without any destination. Soon after, he heard a commotion and made the decision to investigate. He discovered a much older man and 3 young shinobi. One was a girl with amber-colored eyes and shoulder length, light brown hair pulled back in a ponytail. She had a twisted smirk on his face, her clothes were tattered, and she was bleeding. Get away from her, yelled a boy with green eyes and much darker hair. He was severely beaten when he attempted to stand up. The third, meanwhile, sat with his legs cupped against his chest and sobbed uncontrollably. There wasn't really a choice for him. He could either act or leave them alone. He stepped out from behind the tree and yelled, "Didn't you hear him? Leave her alone." When the older shinobi turned, he saw that it was just a child. "It is your unlucky day. You see, I am having a very bad day and I need someone to take it out on, and you look like just the person. Are you ready?" he said, turning away from the child, but when he turned back to face the girl, she had vanished and the boy was standing there, closing his left eye. The older shinobi yelled, "Don't fuck with me, kid," as he attempted to strike Naruto but failed. Naruto then opened his left eye, causing the man in front of him to freeze and begin sobbing in agony. More than anything else, the cries frightened the genin. They saw as he slammed a ball of pure chakra into their adversary's face after it had formed in his hand. I circa. C, can't do th, this anymore, one of them uttered in between sobs. Naruto was so exhausted that he was unaware of how little chakra he currently possessed. He had the chakra to fight if necessary, but he would prefer not to if he could avoid the other person who was coming this way. The man was dressed in the same Hide.8 as the genin when he first appeared. He appeared to be between the middle and late 30s. He wore a sleeveless shirt and a gray flat jacket, but otherwise he was about Kakashi's height. His eyes were copper, and his hair was reddish-brown. He looked at each of them and asked, "What happened here?" The girl squirmed as she approached the dark-haired boy who attempted to save her, but she kept her gaze fixed on Naruto. "This kid, He saved us, she said. The dark-haired boy continued, he was amazing sensei, I have never seen anyone do what he did, while his female teammate assisted him in standing up. Who are you? Inquired their sensei. The girl pointed to each of them. My name is Seto Kyo, and this is Ito Hibiki, and that is my brother Seto Nobu, she said, and our sensei is Tanaka Takahiro. In an attempt to come up with a name, he said, me. Yes, you? He puffed out his chest and remarked, I am surprised you don't know I am only the great shinobi to ever live. Takahiro, who was still closely observing him, said, I am sure, but does the Kami no shinobi have a name? He answered, it is Asura the Great. Takahiro answered, Asura, what village are you from? You don't wear a hite. 8. I am not from one, I just appeared created from all that is awesome, he responded. Kyo questioned, you don't have a home? Sensei, he replied, shaking his head, we should bring him with us. He is powerful, but we can't leave him out here alone because he is just a little kid. Naruto said, yeah, I am just a little kid, as he looked up at him, after saving his team. Takahiro didn't have the heart to kill the child, and he knew he couldn't abandon him because he might cause trouble in another village in a few years. Nobu yelled in horror at the thought of taking the child with them. He is not a kid, he is a monster, he killed him, we couldn't even touch him and he killed him. Asura answered, I didn't kill him, I unalived him. Takahiro asked, sounding perplexed, unalived. He stated, yep, because you can relive someone but you can't unkill someone. Once you kill them you can't take it back, as though it were extremely clear. They all had no idea how to interpret logic, but they decided to ignore it in order to receive medical attention. He uttered, whatever you say kid, let's go. Tanaka became the new Tsukikage 2 years later. A small village to the south was experiencing problems with its two most significant clans, the Hisashi and Mori, and he sat in his office staring down at a scroll that begged for assistance. He lacked the manpower to intervene if it came to that, but the village was on the verge of civil war. Asura said, Sensei, I will go and put an end to this, as she emerged from the shadows. Takahiro said, pinching the bridge of his nose, I cannot send you, they will never take you seriously. In his words, have faith in me sensei. Takahiro inhaled deeply. Very well, Kyo and Hibiki aren't going to be happy I sent you alone. Asura walked out of the office, saying, they don't have to know, I will be back before they return from their mission. At first light, a man who was almost 6 feet tall and wearing a bulky black traveling cloak with the hood pulled over his head to conceal his face appeared. On the south side of the village, he headed for the forest. He moved slowly through the trees while Mori clan members watched from their hiding places. An elderly, kind man with 4 masked shinobi on either side of him welcomed him as he entered a clearing filled with buildings. The leader of the Mori clan inquired, who are you? Who I am doesn't matter, the man said in a robotic voice. I think it does, asserted the leader. Unfazed by the 8 masked shinobi drawing their weapons, the man went on, who I am doesn't matter, but what does matter is why I am here. Then why are you here? I am here to ensure peace. So there are 2 ways this can happen, you and the Hisashi clan can find common ground and end this feud, or I can, either way it is coming to an end. The man said, an Uchiha, and he stepped back. In one eye, he saw the Sharingan, and in the other, he saw an eye that was unlike any he had ever seen. It was steel gray, had a ripple pattern, and was red and black with an odd design. In the camp, Uchiha whispered, we will talk with them, but will they meet with us? He turned his back on the clan leader and said, they will or I will be forced to act, before making his way to the Hisashi clan leader on the northern side of the village. The building grew more opulent as he approached their compound. A man in his late 30s welcomed him and said, strangers aren't allowed here. I have come to deliver the same massage to you that I did the Mori clan, he said quietly. And what massage would that be? He said, you will find peace or I will, with equal composure. The man growled, you think you can get away with threatening me? He said, be careful what you say next because it could be your last. The man simply frowned upon seeing the Sharingan. So who hired Uchiha? A concerned third party outside of the village, he replied. I will be back at nightfall for the answer. After that, he disappeared. The leader of the Hisashi clan gathered 4 of his best, including his oldest child and only son, who was a genius unlike any other. After assembling his team, he sent the world to meet with Old Man Mori in a neutral location. By midday, the 2 parties were seated across a table from each other, and the daimyo, who appeared extremely anxious, said, I am glad you 2 have decided to meet. The head of the Mori clan began, Hisashi-san, before being interrupted. Hisashi declared, someone from our clan will be the next leader. It has been agreed that a leader cannot be from one of our villages, it would give one clan too much power, Mori stated. Your power is waning, old man. We are the future of this village. You are nothing more than a relic of a time long past. We must be reasonable. I am my son Haru will be the next leader. He has no equal in skill or intellect. No one is denying your boy's skill, but for him to be clan head and village leader, it is too much power for one man. As leader he will have to make choices that benefit all, not just the Hisashi clan, Mori said with a smile. Hisashi stated, those are the terms, take them or leave them. When Mori said, you are damning us with your demands. I have made my demands clear, it is on you to accept. Unlike you, I don't fear the Uchiha. After saying, I then you have sealed our fate, Mori stood up, turned to face his clansmen, nodded, and they left, leaving the daimyo in horror. When night fell and everything was quiet, a young girl noticed a blood-red moon. She knew something wasn't right, but she didn't know what was happening. Her father left the house as she saw a cloaked figure moving through the streets, saying, you have made the wrong choice, Hisashi-san, now you have forced my hand. Wood spikes shouted from his shoulders and back, impaling his would-be attackers before branches sprang out, tearing the shinobi apart. He saw 3 shinobi attempting to ambush him. One to his left, one to his right, and the last from behind. He was standing in front of the clan leader with his hand piercing his chest in an instant. The young girl yelled, Daddy, as she ran toward him. She was in the middle of a forest somewhere when she felt a weird jerk as his right eye was fixed on her. Her face started to well up with tears. She was lost, alone, and afraid. She turned and saw 2 shinobi from a different village. What's wrong? She asked. Wiping away her tears, she said, I'm lost. The woman knelt down and asked, where do you live? Her response was, the Hisashi compound in the land of mountains. Kyo, we don't have time, we have to report into Tsukikage, he stated. You just go on ahead, Hibiki. I will take her home and catch up later. What did you do with me, sister? Where is Kasumi? A young shinobi asked, glaring at the man as he stood there with the village burned to the ground. He did his best to stand up, but he was too weak. This didn't have to happen. If only your father would have been a wiser man, but all he cared for was power. The strong are the ones who must lead. A leader must be strong, but it is more than physical gifts. A good leader must be smart and they must know how to work with others to reach a common goal. You all fail to see that your desire power for the sake of power is meaningless and you are willing to kill allies to get it, and that is something that I cannot allow. You know, I went to the Mori clan and the leader offered himself over to me asking me to spare his clansmen for his failings, so I spared him. Your father wanted to go down fighting along with all of you, and so I will end you all. He was grasping a black orb and it struck the man in front of him like parchment. As he turned to face Danzo, the hooded shinobi said, it looks like we were too late, avoiding eye contact. 2 years later, he gazed sorrowfully at the village he had once called home. He did not wish to return to Konoha in this manner. There was another person he wanted to talk to before he met with the Uchiha clan. He leapt from the tree and disappeared as soon as he made contact with the ground. He showed up outside a respectably sized house. At the moment, there were only 2 chakras. One was human, the other was not. He walked into the house, staring at the woman who had been his mother but now only knew him as a stranger. She grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter and asked, who are you? His response, I am no one, sounded inhuman, even to his own ears. She questioned, what is it you want? You possess something I want, he said calmly. She said, you want the Kyuubi, as if she were prepared to battle. I do, but I will allow you to keep him if you can answer a simple question. And what is that? Kushina simply stared at him, asking, what is his name? Don't worry, you won't die. After staring into his eyes, she attempted to move but was unable. She had never seen a second eye like the one he had, and he had the Sharingan. She felt the Kyuubi being drawn away from her as he covered her seal with his hand. When he put his hand on top of her head, she felt her strength return, and when she looked up, he was gone. She collapsed to her knees, weak, and her breathing was hollow and sharp. I told you that you weren't going to die and I meant it, she said. As night fell, he entered the Uchiha shrine, opened the hidden passage, and ascended a set of stairs. The entire chamber erupted in awe of the newcomer, and Sharingans began to activate, saying, this is what has become of the once great Uchiha clan. One of them said, we are still great and the world will know it soon enough. By attacking Konoha, you will weaken Konoha to the point where another war breaks out, but no one will gain from this strategy. The Uchiha clan will lose. But I've come to tell you that there's still time to put an end to this madness, he said, his hood covering his entire face. Fugaku yelled, we cannot just sit back and let this treatment go on. They all flinched as he looked up and said, the sage's tablet. Funny, this wasn't even written by the sage of 6 paths. How I see it, you have 2 choices. The first, you work this out with Konoha diplomatically, or the Uchiha clan will become a distant memory by night's end. he said, turning to face the table. Would you betray your own people? Another Uchiha shouted. In one way or another, I will bring peace to the world because I want it. Will you be present to witness the dawn of that day? That is the only question. Bad choice, he said, as a huge golden hand materialized, enclosing everyone within its reach and crushing them to death, leaving only Fugaku. It didn't have to be like this, but we must live with the choices we make. Fortunately for you, it would be long. You will have to live with the regret. At that point, they all fired their fire jutsus at him, but the flames went out before they reached him. The Uchiha compound was ablaze in black fire, and the only sound that could be heard was the soft crackling of the flames. He turned his back as Fugaku exploded into black flames, and the hooded figure continued to leave the shrine, killing everyone who stood in his way. He stood in front of a girl, who attempted to flee from him. He was hired to kill the Uchiha, but he was going to leave 3 alive, and the residents of the last house haven't seemed to notice anything. He needed to hurry because they would be returning soon, and by then he wanted to be long gone. He heard a woman say, "Welcome back," and as soon as she walked into the room, her smile disappeared. She resembled her kids, so it's unfortunate that she had to pass away. Who are you? As he walked slowly forward, he slit her throat, killing her swiftly and painlessly. Shinigami, he replied coolly, looking her in the eyes and her expression dead. Itachi blocked his path as he was leaving. He said, "Itachi, move, I don't want to kill you," with passion in his voice. But you killed the other members of the Uchiha clan without any trouble? Itachi claimed that he had his Sharingan locked and activated. Itachi's eyes widened, but he moved aside, unwilling to jeopardize his younger brother's safety. You're right, I didn't, and if you don't get out of my way I will kill you, Sasuke and Izumi, he replied, and the masked man disappeared into thin air. When a blonde woke up from his sleep 4 years later, he rolled over and looked at his alarm clock. It was almost noon today, and he was going to be assigned his genin team. He couldn't remember what time he was supposed to be up at the academy to meet these students, who he would probably fail, so there wasn't really any rush. He got dressed and put a pendant with a seal mark carved into it around his neck. A puff of smoke appeared where Naruto had just been, and a man with brown hair stood where Naruto had been. He still had one blue eye and his Rinnegan, and he put on his forehead protector after wrapping the eye. A white-haired boy came into the room after lunch, saying, "Bow before me, fools. I will be the greatest ninja you all will ever meet," as the students at the academy waited impatiently to be assigned to their new teams and meet their sensei. A cool voice behind him said, "Not with your grades," and he nearly fell over with the laughter. He turned to see a girl with dark brown hair, one blue eye, and one green eye. Pulling himself up again, he said, "Kasumi-chan, why do you have to be so mean? I might just have to remove you from my harem." His head dropped again as he walked to his seat, defeated. "I don't know in what twisted reality you have a harem and with me in it, but it isn't this one, so I'm not too hurt," she said with a smile. A girl with jet black hair and eyes so dark they looked black said coolly, "I think she likes you, Ryu-san." "Really?" He smiled and raised his head to ask. "No," she said bluntly, and his head dropped again in surrender. Their sensei, who was in her early 20s and had long, light brown hair and amber eyes, said, "All right, class. I know you were excited, but you still have some time before you are dismissed from my class for the final time, so I need you all to take your seats." She began by listing the teams, and after receiving a variety of reactions, she finally called out, "Team 7 will be Hisashi Kasumi, Hayate Ryu, and Umi Emi, and your sensei is..." Her eyes widened, and she looked up with a nervous smile. "It looks like that they already knew that you were going to fail, so they aren't even bothering to give you guys a sensei." One of their classmates chuckled, expressing their disapproval of her appearance and their knowledge that this would not work out well for them. Kyo Sensei had a worried expression on her face that most of the class had missed, but Emi saw it. "I am not going to fail. I am going to be the greatest ninja ever. You guys are going to beg me to be the next Tsukikage," Ryu said as she stood up and addressed the class. "What's wrong, sensei?" she inquired. She said, Nothing at all. Let me go see if I can find out who your sensei is," and hurried out. The Chunin instructors began to appear, and soon they were the last ones left. An hour passed, then 2, then 3, and at this point they were all tired of waiting. A young man who appeared to be in his 20s entered the room. They had seen him previously, and they had discovered that they had been on the same genin team. He turned and said, "You 3 go to the roof to meet your sensei, and good luck." Then, in a whisper that they could all hear, he said, "You will need it," and as they started to head for the roof, their hearts stopped in their chests. "Hey kid, shouldn't you be somewhere like class or something? We are waiting for our sensei and we wouldn't want them thinking you're in our group." Ryu yelled at the boy after Kasumi pointed out a boy their age lying down and staring up at the sky. "All right. Let's start with introductions, like tell me your name, likes, dislikes, hobbies, and dreams, the boy said in a bored tone as he glanced over at the students and said, "My first impression of you all, I hate you." Sweat drops fell on the back of their heads. The boy's casual demeanor infuriated Ryu, who said, "Why don't you go first, you little bastard?" "Okay, my name, well you all can just call me Sensei, as for my likes you don't need to know, my dislikes you all. My hobbies I don't want to tell you in my dream," he said without further thought. "I had a funny one last night." "You only expressed your dislike for us and your belief that you are our sensei without saying anything else," Ryu yelled. He said, "You can go next," without even glancing at them. He glared at Naruto, who didn't seem to care. "My name is Hayate Ryu, and I love beautiful girls. And I dislike people who don't know how to treat a woman and you," he added. "My hobbies are collecting women's hearts, and my dream is to be the greatest ninja ever and have the world's greatest harem. So I have a pervert on my team," Naruto thought. "She sounds like she has some promise," he thought to himself. "I will go next. My name is Hisashi Kasumi. I like cute things and reading. I dislike perverts. My hobbies are singing, training, and cooking, and my dream is to be the best I can be." An evil smirk appeared on his face, which they did not seem to notice, and he sat up for the first time, looking at the students. "My name is Emi, and I like too many things. I don't really dislike anything, and hobbies I guess I will try anything at least once, and my dream is to be a well-rounded person. What a strange group, I am going to have fun with them," he said. He said, "Okay, tomorrow we are going to have a test to see if you can continue to be ninja," and they all gave him a startled look. Kasumi said, "But we took a test so that we could become genin," with a nervous tone. "I am putting you through this test to see if you can truly cut it as a ninja. That was just to weed out the weak. So, tomorrow at 5:10 a.m., meet me at Training Ground 10. Additionally, avoid eating anything to avoid getting sick." His students were appalled as he said, "Bye now," and vanished. They all arrived by 5 o'clock the following morning, and 5 o'clock came and went without their sensei. It was nearly 11 when he finally appeared, wafting through smoke, and said, "Good morning." They all yelled at him, "You are nearly 6 hours late." He remarked, "I told you all 10:05, Kasumi glared at him and said, "No, you said 10 after 5:05. "Why would I do that, and did I don't want to wake up that early," he said, his expression bewildered. Kasumi said, "Never mind," and put her face in her hand. He produced 2 silver bells and said, "Well, since we are all here, I will explain the rules. You must get one to pass. If you don't, you will be tied to a tree while the rest of us eat. If you don't receive a bell, you will also be sent back to the academy." Emi said, "But you only have 2 bells, since this is accurate, at least one of you will fail and be tethered to a tree while the others eat." He looked around and found all 3 of them in a matter of seconds. He reached into his pouch and pulled out a book with the title, A Tale of the Legendary Sucker, laughing as he read it. He ducked as a kick went over his head, and in one fluid motion he made a tiger seal. "And if you want any chance of getting a bell from me you have to come at me as if you were going to kill me, otherwise you will have no chance of passing," he said. Ryu yelled, "Kasumi, look out," but it was too late. After shoving her in the ass and sending her flying, Naruto yelled, "1,000 years of pain," and then he opened his book as if nothing had happened. As she stood up, Kasumi yelled, "What the hell was that?" with a furious expression. He said, "A jutsu," without raising his head from his book. Ryu yelled, "Well, let's see you do that to me," as he launched his assault. "No, I have a different jutsu for you," he said, making an unidentified hand gesture before disappearing. "Water torture jutsu," he said, inserting his finger into Ryu's mouth and then into his ear, which made Ryu jump and scream. Then he disappeared and resurfaced in front of Emi, making a ram hand gesture. "2 down 1 to go," he said. When the other 2 appeared, he waved to them before disappearing. "Hell's hand jutsu," he said as he started to tickle Emi. She couldn't resist and started laughing so hard it sounded like she was crying. Ryu remarked, "Our sensei is an idiot and a pervert," assuming they were by themselves. "That may be the case, but we can't beat him alone. We will have to work together if any of us are going to pass," said Kasumi. "Well, who would fail if we do get the bells, because there are only 2 bells and 3 of us," Emi told the group. A quiet voice said, "Well, it won't matter if we can't get any of the bells," Kasumi said. They all stood there for a while, trying to think of a way to get the bells. "Well, I will let you 2 pass if we get the bells," Ryu said with a feeble smile. Their sensei was reading a book while seated beneath a tree when they discovered him. "So, have you babies come to tell me that you give up?" "No, we have come to take the bells from you," Ryu yelled. "You 3? He asked with a humorous tone. Yes, they all said at once. You are aware that one of you will fail anyhow? Yes, they said again. With a serious expression on his face, he closed his eyes and took a deep breath. You all pass, he said quickly, smiling. Well then, that means, he said as he got up, and they all took a step back, appearing a little uneasy as he closed his book. What? They all appeared dumbfounded, Ryu remarked. When working alone was more beneficial for each of you, I wanted to see if you three could collaborate. Even if two of you had gotten the bells on your own, which you wouldn't have, he clarified, none of you would have passed. What's the point of having 3 bells? Kasumi inquired. It would have defeated the point of the test. He didn't want it obvious we needed to work together but that we needed to turn on each other in order to pass, Emi pondered. Naruto grinned and remarked, very good, that was the whole point to this test. Sensei, Kasumi murmured. What? She began to pause and said, you know, you're a bastard. He said, well that's all, I will see you guys here tomorrow at 10 and the real training will begin, before he disappeared, his head drooping a little. They were almost 2 hours past the deadline when they noticed the clock he had left behind. Had he known they were going to collaborate, or had he forgotten? Kasumi thought as she saw it, and she forced it from her thoughts as they headed back to the village. They ran into Kyo Sensei while they were getting food. It appeared that he had eaten all of the lunches while their bastard Sensei was waiting for them, which was better than failing, so they weren't too upset about it. What do you know about our sensei, Kyo Sensei? With a suspicious look on her face, Kasumi inquired. She said, he was my teammate, with a tense smile. How old is he compared to us? Ryu interrupted. True, but he became a genin by 4, a chunin by 5, and a junin by 6, she declared, maintaining her apprehensive smile. Is there anything else you want us to know? With a renewed respect for her sensei, Kasumi inquired. Yeah, he is always late. Ryu glared at their former sensei and remarked, we already know this. She said, and one last thing, with seriousness. What is it? As they sat down to eat, they inquired. Never say his name 3 times, you will be cursed, she said, her face eerily threatening. We don't even know his name, Ryu said, furiously crossing his arms. Well, it's for the best, she continued, nodding. Can you then identify it for us? Emi inquired. I could, but I'm not. After 10 minutes of being pleaded with, she finally complied. All right, his name is, she said, looking around and leaning in. Asura, they all said. With a laugh, Ryu exclaimed, Asura, Asura. If that were my name, I wouldn't want people to know it either. Kyo Sensei hurriedly said, don't do it, I'm telling you, don't do it, but it was already too late. Even though no one else seemed to notice their sensei, Ryu started to perspire as he stared into the only eye on his sensei's face, and after he managed to break eye contact, everyone looked at him and asked if he was okay. Asura, he said as the sky turned dark in the middle of the day, and he was staring at Ryu. No, he was staring at him, but chills went up his spine through him, into his soul. Yeah, I'm fine, he said, but he left quickly after claiming to have things to do at home, and they all soon parted ways. They put in more work than they had previously, training daily and going on missions every other day. Ryu exclaimed in exasperation after completing another babysitting mission, I am tired of all these damn D-ranked missions. Asura, accustomed to only taking on A-ranked or higher missions, said, I will talk to the Tsukikage and see what he can do about it, feeling that these D-ranked missions were not worth his time at all. I love you bastard. Sensei, Kasumi said joyfully, although he didn't particularly like the nickname she had given him. He assumed she hadn't forgiven him for sticking her in the ass during his test, but he did say something before he disappeared. Both Kakashi Sensei and Ero Sennin would have been proud of him for that small jutsu. When they showed up in the Tsukikage the following day, Kyo Sensei informed them that the man had previously served as her sensei, meaning he had also trained their current sensei. I have granted your request for a B-ranked mission, Kyo Sensei said. The genin appeared shocked that they had gone straight from C-ranked missions to B-ranked ones. I have granted your request for a B-ranked mission. Yes, we are complete jerks, Ryu exclaimed with delight. Are you certain we're prepared for a mission with a B rank? Kasumi inquired, sounding a little uneasy. I'm sure Sensei wouldn't have requested a B-ranked mission if he didn't think we couldn't handle it, Emi said in a bored voice. They nearly collapsed at this point. No, he told me you are completely incompetent and you could barely handle D-ranked missions, they said. But I told him that wasn't true, and I've given you a B-ranked mission to prove it. Although it is more of a C-ranked mission, the region it is in makes it dangerous enough to earn a B rank. Bastard. Sensei, they whispered to themselves. You called? Standing behind them, their sensei said, and they all froze in terror, not believing he would have heard. The Tsukikage questioned whether assigning them a B-ranked mission was a wise choice. "Well, I think it is time to meet your mission," he said. "Come in," he called. A clean, shaven man in a navy blue suit entered the room and held his head up as if he could smell something bad. "So where is my escort?" he asked. The Tsukikage said, "Right in front of you," as the man's gaze landed on the ninja in front of him. "Has anyone reached puberty yet?" the man inquired. "Don't worry, I trained one of them personally and he has been a Chunin for 6 years now." "And which one is that?" "So I get the one with one eye, that's reassuring," the Tsukikage said, pointing to Naruto. "What caused him to lose his sight?" The fake smile that his former pupil was now giving the client made the Kage look appalled. "Are you curious about the contents beneath these bandages?" The Tsukikage shook his head rapidly as he spoke in a falsely sweet voice. He said, "No," with hesitation. "All right, tell me about the mission." "You are to take me to the Land of Waves. They're building a bridge to help increase trade and I want to be the first to tap into their resource," said the man. "Say no more, I was hoping to pay a visit there soon, kills 2 birds with 1 stone. So we leave tomorrow at 10, no better make it 10:30, I need a well-balanced breakfast," Naruto replied with a chin scratch. "Isn't that for me to decide?" he said, his voice trailing off as the one-eyed Chunin gave him a look. 10:30, he said hastily, and Naruto nodded. "By the way, what is your name?" "Mine is Asura." "Kato," he uttered, appearing frightened of the small ninja. Naruto uttered the words, "Very well, good day to you all," before he vanished. Ryu's sensei had left the room when he said, "Never say his name, because if you do so 3 times, you will be cursed." They all wondered about their sensei, who seemed wise beyond his years, but they had never seen what made him a Chunin-level ninja Chunin. They were careful never to say anything like that in front of him because he was a madman, his training regiments were hell, and it was worse when they irritated him. "I know I did it," he said, his eyes wide like a madman. The 3 genin left the office unsure of what to expect from their first mission outside of the village, so they decided to go to lunch, something they had not done before they were placed on the same team. When they saw their sensei the following day, they were taken aback because, aside from meals, he was never on time. However, he believed he was always on time, saying something like, "I am on time. I got there just when I wanted to." Sensei was talking to Kato when Naruto called, "You're late," and he always knew if they were late or not. On the day they had training, he made them wish they were dead. "We are out of time at 10:30, Ryu yelled. "To be early is to be on time, to be on time is to be late, and to be late is unacceptable," replied Naruto. Kasumi remarked, "You're one to talk, bastard." Sensei, with a drop of perspiration on the back of her head. "Bastard. Sensei?" Kato repeated, his face displaying bewilderment. Trying to sound both hurt and innocent, Naruto said, "Yeah, for some reason they think I'm a bastard. I don't get how they could think that." However, he turned to his group and looked serious, saying, "We need to finish this mission as quickly as possible." "Why is it dangerous?" Kasumi asked, her voice unable to conceal her fear. Even Emi, who didn't express much emotion, nodded in fear. As everyone, including Kato, leaned in, he paused and said, "If I remember correctly, the Land of Waves." He had a serious expression on his face that they had never seen before. "The Land of Waves doesn't have ramen," he said, and they all fell to their knees. "Is bastard Sensei your only thought?" Kasumi yelled. As they stood up again, he rubbed the back of his head and said, "I don't know, I never thought of it." They began to move toward the Land of Waves, but none of them were looking. Naruto made a series of hand signals before putting his hand on the ground, at which point a small fox materialized. Naruto nodded at the fox, and it fled. Emi remarked, "I didn't know there were any foxes around here," as she saw the small fox bolting away. "You never know what you will find if you are paying attention," Naruto grinned, and Emi observed him while they were walking. "What are you doing?" After some time, he asked. As she continued to observe him, she remarked, "You said if we pay attention we will find something." "Okay," he replied, uncertain of her next move. She gave a straightforward response. "We don't know much about you, so if I watch you I will find something." He rubbed his chin thoughtfully and said, "I guess, so what have you discovered thus far?" She stated, "That you're an idiot," with equal clarity. He smiled and said, "I get that a lot," which did not reassure Kato, who was paying them to keep him safe. After what seemed like an eternity, Naruto saw the small fox, who nodded before running away again. He knew that he had about a month before Gato would show up at the bridge, and if it came to that, he always had that option open to him. The challenge would not be finding him, but rather doing it without being noticed by his student or the Konoha shinobi who were in the area. Sending clones to find him would make it easy and he would have him found in a day or two, but that wouldn't be the best course of action with Kakashi around. He would have to move carefully, and if he did this correctly, he might be able to save Haku. "How are you, sensei?" With a worried expression, Kasumi asked. He smiled and said, "I'm fine," before turning to face the battle. "I wonder how it will turn out this time." In a whisper, he said to himself. "Sensei, what are you talking about?" Ryu inquired, appearing concerned as well. They found an inn to stay at while they completed their mission, or missions, in his case, because Ryu had been annoying him by complaining that he wanted to rest. Nothing at all," he said when they finally arrived in the land of waves. The Tsukikage had ordered him to kill Gato, and he didn't care how it was done as long as it was done. His team was asleep when the sun went down, so he crouched outside and asked, "What happened?" As the small fox appeared, he questioned the young fox. "The four-leaf village ninja are fine, they defeated the missing Nin, but I don't think he is dead. A hunter Nin took his body," replied the tiny fox. "Great, what do you think our time is?" "I would say about a month considering his injuries." As the little fox disappeared, he said, "Thank you," grinning as he heard footsteps approaching him. "Kato, how may I be of assistance to you?" "I was wondering how you are a sensei and you look no older than the ones you were teaching," Kato replied. "We might appear the same age but we are far from equals when it comes to skills. I have my 6th year in Endo already, so if you have any worries don't you are safe as long as you stay on my good side," Naruto said with a grin. The man had sent 3 foxes off, one to watch the Konoha shinobi, one to watch Haku and Zabuza, and one to search the land of waves. "I understand well, good night," he said, turning off and walking back into the inn, but he stayed sitting there staring off into the distance until the sun had begun to peek over the horizon. Kato looked perplexed as he said, "I hope you all slept well because, today we are going to have fun," as he walked out of his room with a twisted smile and a bounce in his step. His students did not like it. His way of staring at them gave them the creeps, and they never liked his idea of fun, because it was only ever fun for him. "I assumed that everyone enjoyed having a good time?" Kato inquired. Kasumi stepped back as his smile grew. "Yeah, but he is a sick and twist bastard," he said. "He is the master of torture," Ryu yelled in terror. The Kato recalled Asura's statement to him the previous evening. "I have my 6 years in Anbu already." Although he was ignorant of ninja rank, he was certain that a man with 6 years of experience in anything at his age was extremely capable. "We'll begin with some light sparring, and since I want to have some fun, it will be you 3 against me." "Let's go," he said, guiding them outside. "The last person standing wins a fantastic prize. If you are killed, captured, or lose a real battle, you are out. So, get ready to go." They vanished, and he thought to himself, "They're getting much better at hiding." He smiled, then turned to face Kato, who was watching in disbelief while taking out a book and starting to read. "Are you certain that reading at this time is appropriate for you? For what reason do you think I should nap?" He heard an ambush, a drop of sweat formed on the back of his head, and he disappeared into the earth after hearing the words, "Earth release. Hide like mole jutsu." Ryu screamed. Where did he go? And soon his teammates were standing beside him. "Earth release. Whack. Hey. Mole jutsu," he said, appearing behind them and using a paper fan to whack them on the head while he continued to read his book. "I win, should we try again?" They attacked him this time without waiting for him to say, "Start." He smiled and sidestepped all of their blows. "So is that how we are playing?" he asked in a tone of coldness they had never heard before. When their sensei approached them, vanishing and then reappearing behind him, Ryu exclaimed, "Shit," his eyes wide with horror. Kasumi rushed to his defense, preventing Ryu from being eliminated. Emi attacked while he was busy evading her attack, but he blocked it, diverting his attention from his team and putting his hand to the ground. 3 streaks rushed past the genin into the trees. "How on earth was that sensei? Are they going to kill us?" Ryu questioned in horror. When he attacked his students again at the end of the hour, they were sitting there panting. "No, they were meant to make you drop your guard," he said. He rubbed his chin and remarked, "Now I think chakra control, by climbing trees." "That sounds easy," Kasumi remarked with a sigh of relief. "What's the catch?" Emi inquired as a smile returned to his face. Astonished, they looked at their sensei. "All right, have at it," he said, laying you down and closing his eyes while gazing up at the sky. "I am glad you asked. You cannot use your hands." Seeing their perplexed expressions, he moved to the closest tree and kept walking straight. "How on earth are we supposed to carry out such an action?" Ryu called out to the slumbering Chunin. Asura would typically roll over on his side and say, "Figure it out," in response to their inquiries, a response they detested. You tell us to learn how to do something, but you never explain how to do it. You never teach us anything. Kasumi yelled and threw a small rock at him, and when it struck him, she and her group realized they were about to get it. With an evil gleam in his eye, he said, "Sitting up, you're right. What kind of sensei am I having you learn to climb trees on your own? But trees are boring. I hope you are up for a swim," he said. The professional badass would have fled home to their mother. "Sure, why not?" Ryu replied, thinking it would be more enjoyable than scaling trees. However, he was quickly convinced by the laugh they heard, the laugh of a mental patient. The rest of the day was pure hell for the genin, who had to drag themselves back into their rooms in silence, wanting to complain about their sensei but being too exhausted to do so. "I am going to teach you to walk on water. The first one to reach me will get the rest of the day off, but every time you fall in, well, let's just say you don't want to know," he said, still laughing. Kato stated, "You are rather ruthless, aren't you?" without asking a question. As the sun started to set, Naruto stayed outside and responded, "I'm a lot nicer to them than the ones who taught me were," laughing. "It's better for them to figure things out on their own. It teaches them the skill in problem solving," he said. "What are you saying? My sensei asked me if I wanted anything to eat when I learned the summoning jutsu, and when the bill came, he treated me to that meal. Or rather, he took me rather than bailed. He then asked me if there was anyone I wanted to say goodbye to." He smiled as he reflected on those times with nostalgia. That doesn't sound too bad. While Kato looked horrified at the idea of throwing a child over a cliff, he continued to smile and said, "Then he threw me off a cliff. The rock were too slick to hold on to even with chakra, and the only way for me to live was to use the summoning jutsu. This was another one of my jutsus that I had to learn on my own, being left to my own devices for days on end. However, it strengthened me because I was able to develop my own jutsu and learn jutsu that no one else knew." "You were harmed by the Tsukikage?" "No, my godfather was the one who did it." As he walked to his room, he said, "Good night," leaving the pendant on in case someone entered his room while he was asleep or something happened and he didn't have time to put it on. "He was the strongest ninja I had ever known, but he was killed some time ago," he said. "Naruto, why didn't you bring him back? You said that you would die with him, but here you are standing before me. You lied to me, that's all you are." "Naruto, a liar," a shinobi with pink hair yelled. Tears streaming down his cheeks, he said, "I'm sorry, Sakura. I tried," reaching for her as Ino emerged behind her. His voice was full of venom. "You are nothing more than a monster. You don't deserve to live. You should just drop dead," she said. His old friends all showed up, repeating the same word over and over again, "Monster." He was a little boy again, standing alone, and the faceless people ignored his very existence. He was crying, but no one seemed to notice or care until a boy with black hair stepped forward and extended his hand. Naruto reached for it, but the boy's hand went straight to his throat, lifting him straight into the air as his free hand began to build up chakra. "Why did you kill your best friend when you couldn't save any of them?" "My son," Kagaya said, emerging in front of him, "you still failed to save them, and now their blood is on your hands. Quit it, quit talking." He screamed as loudly as he could, but the monster's cries only grew louder. The sun had already risen when Naruto sat up in a cold sweat. "Sensei," a terrified voice called from the other side of the door, and he got up and walked to the door, wearing a smile that stopped short of his eyes. Nobody ever noticed, though, because no one ever looked past the smile. Who would care about a demon? With a worried expression, Kasumi asked, "Sensei, are you okay? I thought I heard something from your room." Kasumi went outside where the other genin were waiting, and he said, "I'm fine but no training today," before re-entering his room and shutting the door. In response to the unasked question, Kasumi stated, "No training today," adding, "I think there is something wrong with Sensei." "You figured that out when? Could it be his childish demeanor or the hell he put us through?" Ryu laughed. "No, I'm serious. I want by his room," and he was shouting about something. Then when he opened the door he looked different, almost broken, her tone fading away. Maybe he was thinking about something that happened to him. What do we really know about him? Ryu shrugged and remarked, "What troubles could he have? He is just a poor little genius." "You think that's so?" Kato said, shaking his head as he left the inn. "I asked him why he is so hard on you guys, and based on what he told me, let's just say that you guys have it nothing compared to how he did. Before whining about your lot in life, the three of you ought to go out and observe the situation here." It was the first time any of them had ever heard Kasumi so badly upset. "What do you know about me? I saw my family killed right before my eyes," she snapped. After he said, "You're shinobi, how many families will you break up? How many families do you think your sensei has seen broken either by his hand or someone else's?" They all stood silently. What did he know about their sensei? "Well, let's just say that you guys have it nothing compared to how he did," she said, feeling guilty because she had never really tried to get to know him. After their first test, which he had given them, she had forgotten that he was their age and a Chunin. What must he have seen at such a young age, more than them, more than her? There must have been some reason why he had become so strong. The next chance I had to talk to him and really try to get to know him as a person. The city was deserted, the grocery stores had no food, and no one was in the streets when she spotted a pink-haired girl in one of the stores, looking at a small selection that was marked at ridicule prices, and she realized that she was a shinobi from another village. Did this have anything to do with why Sensei had been acting strange since yesterday morning? A blonde with blue eyes who reminded her of her sensei's smiled amiably down at her, reaching down to take her hand. She hurriedly said, "Sorry," as she bumped into someone who wasn't paying attention to where she was going. "It's okay, my name is Naruto," he said, grinning at her. "Are you a ninja?" "My name is Kasumi." Observing his leaf-adorned forehead protector, she inquired. "Yes, I am going to be the greatest shinobi to come out of the Hidden Leaf Village, even greater than my father," he said with pride. Standing behind him, a dark-haired boy with black eyes said, "Naruto, I don't think you will become stronger than your father." "Who is your father, then?" With equal pride, he declared, "He is the fourth Hokage." Trying not to sound envious, she said, "You must be strong then, having the Hokage as your father and all he can teach you. How about you?" She questioned the boy with the dark hair. "I just want to kill the man that killed my clan," he stated icily. "Your clan?" His response was, "I am one of the last Uchiha." "Wow, I heard you guys are supposed to be really strong, but I also heard you guys were wiped out by one man." He turned to her. "I didn't mean anything by it," she responded quickly, "but I heard of another clan that was wiped out by one man. There is a rumor going around that he was a Uchiha and it could be the same man," she continued quickly. The two men blushed a little when the Uchiha said, "You are a strange girl," smiling slightly as she looked up at them. "Would you like to come to lunch with us? If you guys know a good place, I don't have a problem joining you," she said with another smile. He had a clone stay with the businessman they were supposed to be protecting, and it didn't take long for Naruto to discover that Emi and Ryu were fishing, or rather, that Emi was just staring at him, which had become a habit of hers since he had told her that if she looked she could find things she didn't know were there, and she took him a little too literally. He was surprised to find Kasumi with the hidden leaf ninja, and he watched her from a distance for a while. "Sharingan number Kakashi," he said without turning around, having seen a familiar figure behind him. "I must say I am honored that you would come over here to say hello. You seem to know who I am, but I can say the same about me," Kakashi remarked in his typically slack voice. "I'm offended that you've already forgotten about me. Does 8 years ago sound familiar to you?" Finally turning around, Naruto said, "So you do remember me. I feel so honored." Kakashi's one visible eye widened. "Why are you in this place?" "I am here to check on my student." "Your pupil?" Kakashi remarked, observing him out of the corner of his bare eye. "Yes, that girl. She is one of my students, but you're so young." His tone was mockingly hurt. "I have been a Chunin for about 6 years now," he said. "I don't think we have been on the best of terms with you all. I think the year I took the Chunin exam was the last year my village participated. However," Asura smiled and said, "I think this year might be different. One more thing. Don't say anything if they don't know she's a ninja. She needs a little fun before the hell I put them through." With a shiver running up her spine, Kasumi halted her activity and asked, "Kasumi, are you okay?" Naruto inquired. She looked around and said, "Yes, I just feel like something bad is going to happen." He disappeared after saying, "I will be back to pick her up in a few hours. Let her know that the bastard is coming," leaving Kakashi looking perplexed. However, he dismissed it and resumed reading his book before making his way back to the house to deliver the news, which did not seem to sit well with her. With all of the training they had undergone, it felt like they had been here for more than a month, but it had only been a month. As a dense fog began to form on the bridge, Kasumi recalled seeing the hidden leaf shinobi making their way to the bridge. Unable to face whatever it was alone, she didn't wait for anyone and simply fled without thinking. She made a few quick hand signals, water release, water clone jutsu, as a water clone blocked the senbon coming at them, and then she made a few more, water release, water dome jutsu, as a dome made of water inkas the two young males. When Kakashi first saw her, he felt dread because he did not sense her sensei, and he knew that if something happened to her, it would not end well for any of them on the bridge if the young shinobi decided. She only needed to figure out how to get them out alive, saying, "Be careful." She heard a call, but it was too late for her to make a single hand signal. A huge water dragon emerged from the sea and crashed into Zabuza, smashing against the bridge. She turned to see it was Kakashi, and the boys appeared just as shocked as she did. Even the inexperienced young shinobi sensed it coming. It was like nothing they had ever experienced before. The closest thing Kasumi could think of was standing in the middle of an ocean with no end in sight. The air was heavy, making it difficult to breathe, and from the mist, a figure loomed, drawing closer and closer. They were filled with a fear they had never experienced before. It was as if their own death were blazing down on them, and there was no way out of it. It was so certain. The figure came to a halt as the mist started to melt back, revealing a tall man wearing a white cloak with flames at the bottom, a hood pulled over his head, covering his face, and a kitsune mask. She had seen that mask before. This was the same man who killed her clan, but why save her now? A demon to those who have never seen a true demon, he said calmly, referring to Zabuza the demon of the mist. With his eyes focused on the masked man in front of them, Zabuza said, "It looks like our fight will have to be put on hold for a while or we all will die here today." He had a laid-back stance, as though he didn't give a damn. "Are you familiar with this man?" Kakashi inquired. "In my opinion, he is not listed in the bingo book in the majority of countries, and those that do have a flee on sight order." Kasumi wanted to attack him to exact revenge on him for taking her family, but she was afraid because she didn't want to die and he had so much power that there was no question that the fight would end in death. "Sharingan no Shinigami," Zabuza said. She saw Sasuke make a move and he raised a single finger, causing them all to fall to their knees. The pressure the man exuded was unnatural. No man could be this powerful. "Calm yourself, young Uchiha," he said, allowing them to stand up straight. "If you retreat now then you don't have to die, none of you do," he said just as calmly. "Do you really think I'm going to let you get away with killing my clan?" Sasuke yelled his unfinished Sharingan. "Foolish boy," he said, and Sasuke recoiled in horror as a monstrous fox with red eyes and 9 menacing tails, the appearance of a true demon, appears behind the man. "What's wrong, Sasuke?" Naruto felt overwhelmed by the power in front of him and was unable to speak when he asked. She couldn't believe how far beneath him she was, and when Kasumi attacked without thinking, all she could think about was him, standing over her father. He easily avoided her attack, but before she could strike again, she was blasted back with raw chakra power. The masked man reached into his robes and threw something at Zabuza's feet, and he picked it up, releasing the seal upon it, and out fell a head, the head of Gato. Kakashi was relieved that her sensei had saved her, catching her before she hit the water below, but the problem remained. This man was too strong, and there was nothing they could do if he wanted them dead. His words, "It seems we are no longer enemies since my employer is dead," came as he turned to leave. "Haku, let's go." Since Kasumi had fainted from the shock while Asura was carrying her back to the inn, 3 small foxes were waiting for him when he returned. They were all different sizes and colors, but the most notable difference was that the one with 3 tails spoke first. The fox's voice was much deeper than one might have imagined for a small fox with brownish organ-colored fur, and his green eyes contrasted nicely with the brown fur. "The Tsukikage wants to know how much longer you think this mission will take," the fox said. "Give us about a week then travel time," Asura got back to them. The 3-tailed fox said, "And he needs your answer," and stood up to stretch. He turned to the other fox and said, "He will have my answer upon my arrival," before the fox fled. The 2-tailed fox, who was the only female in the group he had called upon, said softly, "It seems like the copycat ninja has been trying to find out about you but he has been quiet about it." She had bright blue eyes and white fur. "Are you aware of what he discovered?" Asura simply grinned and disappeared after saying, "From what I heard, nothing. It seems that only 1-2 men can open your file, you and the Tsukikage." The smallest said, "The others are fine," in a shy tone. The little fox disappeared after saying, "Thanks Ichiro, you did a great job," with his ears perking up at the compliment. "I will call you again," he said. They were getting close to home a week after the mission was over. "Home sweet home," Ryu exclaimed as he rushed through the gates. He said, "Get some rest, we have a long day tomorrow, be at the training grounds at 9, and then he disappeared. "Are you certain we should be there at 9? Calmly, Emi asked. His words, "I wouldn't say it if I didn't mean it," vanished. Ryu turned to his brunette teammate and said, "He's going to be late. Kasumi, are you okay? You haven't said much since Sensei carried you back to the inn unconscious." "I'm fine," she said with a smile, "but I'll see you 2 tomorrow," she said as she hurried away. "Come in," he called as Asura appeared at the knock on the Tsukikage's door. "It's the man I've been waiting for. Do you have your response, then?" "I nominate my students for the upcoming Chunin exam." "I nominate my students for the upcoming Chunin exam," he said with a smile on his face, "but I have to give them one more test before I let them participate. When they think they only have each other, I want to see how well they utilize all of the skills they have acquired." Raising his eyebrows, the Tsukikage remarked, You know that is not necessary. I know, but I must see my handiwork firsthand, he said with a sly smile, and all three of his students looked around, sensing that something negative was about to happen. The sensei was only punctual for meals and their final mission when they left the village, so when the three of them arrived at 9 in the morning, they were all surprised to see him already waiting for them. You're on time, sensei, Ryu exclaimed in surprise. A cheerful, we have another mission today, he said. You're on time, sensei, Ryu said it again. I'm always on time, I arrive on my time, he grinned. But you're the one who appoints the times we met, Kami said. That's neither here nor there, he said, dismissing her remark. We need to recover a stolen scroll because we think he is still in the forest, waiting for the situation to subside before attempting to flee. Although this mission is also B-ranked, it is far riskier than the previous one. But don't worry, I'm here, and I won't be paid if you guys pass away, so let's go. Is that the only reason you watch out for our safety? Without glancing at him, Kasumi asked, rubbing his chin in a daze before responding. With a smile, he said, yeah, that sounds right, and his team nearly fell. They were confident because they had just completed their last B-ranked mission, and Ryu was just strolling through the forest carefree when Asura jumped in front of him and he tripped a wire. They saw their sensei being filled with kunai, and he fell to the ground, staring up at his team as though he had been used as a target practice. Finish the mission, I'm counting on you. The words, we need to get help for sensei, came out of Kasumi's panic. No, Ryu replied, since we are ninja, we must complete the mission as sensei requested. However, Kasumi, what is the range of your water clones? I don't know why. If you can send a message back to the village telling them that sensei has been injured and we can finish this mission, Ryu replied. She said, water release, water clone jutsu, as a clone fled toward the village. A few minutes later, they resumed their journey, but the assurance they had at the start of the mission had vanished. I am insulted that they would send 3 little brats after me, a voice called from the tree branch above them. The voice belonged to a man with black hair framing his thin face, wearing a Chunin vest, a gray shirt underneath, black pants, and ninja sandals. He leapt down and threw a kunai that struck the 3 students before he touched the ground, and they burst into water clones, he said, looking around, barely evading Ryu's initial attack. The Rouge ninja pulled out a kunai, but a water wall appeared before he could counter. Shit, he said, leaping away from the wall. As a fireball approached him and he was barely able to avoid it, he yelled, a smile spreading across his face. They saw their sensei approaching them, panting blood soaked, and he said, I must say that you 3 are better than I thought, but it's time to see how good you really are, before disappearing in swirling leaves. What are you doing here, sensei? You should have been waiting for the medical unit we sent for, Kasumi responded. His words, I couldn't let you guys do this one on your own, came as he staggered them. Emi muttered, release, and their sensei disappeared. What took place? Where did sensei go? Kasumi inquired, surveying the area. The kunai that landed between them had a paper bomb attached to it. It was genjutsu. Sensei taught me how to use some genjutsu and release it, she said calmly. They felt some of the force, but it was enough to cause them pain. Water release. Water dome jutsu, the phrase reads. A dome encased the bomb just before it exploded. That was good thinking, Kasumi, Ryu grinned. She said, thanks, but we are not in the clear yet, as she searched for their adversary. He said, I see you guys are well adapted with ninjutsu and genjutsu, let's see your taijutsu, then leapt in front of them. You 2 stay back, wait until you see an opening, Ryu whispered to his teammates, who nodded but still appeared anxious. Ryu ran at the man with everything he had, knowing from the start that he was not as good as the man he was fighting, but he was confident that he could make the man make a mistake so that they could take the victory from him. When the smoke cleared, Kasumi grabbed the scroll from him as a fireball struck him, and the man was gone. They heard clapping from above, and the man jumped down, still clapping, and they prepared to fight again, despite feeling exhausted. I guess you 3 aren't completely incompetent, but you are still incompetent nonetheless, the man said, standing in front of them with a smile on his face and a sense of complete well-being. Ryu asked, looking perplexed, what was this all about? We thought, but how? The Tsukikage then showed up beside their sensei. We wanted to make sure that you all were ready to stand on your own. We also wanted to see if you could work together on a mission and if you could use what you have learned, thinking you had no safety net if you failed. I think they are ready for the Chunin exam, he said with a grin. Do you think we'll be Chunin? With a startled expression, Kasumi inquired. Asura shrugged and remarked, that is if you good for nothing bums pass. Yes, we love you too, sensei, Ryu remarked mockingly. When is the test, then? A few weeks, replied the Tsukikage. I am sure that Asura-san will allow you to have the rest of the day off since you three did so well today. Sensei, why don't you come with us? We're going to get some food, Kasumi said, grinning at him as they all appeared hopeful, and he nodded. Why do you want me to come now? He asked, glancing at them suspiciously. The other two gazed at him. Well, on the last mission I realized that we don't know anything about you and I was hoping that we could get to know you a little better, she said, smiling feebly. He smiled and said, okay, I'll come. They headed to a small ramen stand, where some of their classmates stopped as they passed. A boy with dirty blonde hair said, look, it's the bottom of the barrel club, and his teammates paused to chuckle. A girl with short auburn hair remarked, I am surprised that they are here. I thought that they would have died or quieted down by now. Where is your sensei? Do they feel embarrassed to be spotted with you? He is here with us, Ryu said, pretending he wasn't bothered by what they were saying. Where is he? The blonde inquired, and Asura turned to face them. The three genin chuckled at his appearance, but he simply grinned as he glanced past the three children. His gaze returned to his food. Akane, I thought you would have trained your students to have more respect, he said. When a woman with dark red hair, who appeared to be around 23, said, I am sorry, senpai. Senpai. They all exclaimed in surprise. Yes, he led me on numerous missions when I was a Chunin before I switched to the Junin. I've only been a Junin for 4 years. So sensei is a badass, by the way he acts you would never know, Ryu thought to himself as Asura worked on his 6th bowl of ramen. One believes senpai has been a Junin for 6 years now, she said. Are your students taking the Chunin exam, senpai? She turned to the 3 students who were now observing their sensei eating. Yeah, he said, ordering another bowl of ramen. She smiled at them and said, I feel bad for you guys, but you are also lucky. You say that, but why? I know you feel bad for us, but how are we fortunate that he is insane? Ryu inquired. She continued to smile as she said, he is hard, but I'm sure you learned a lot from him. Ryu jumped up and pointed at him, saying, he is crazy. He hasn't taught us anything. He tells us to do something but never tells us how to do it. They were shocked to see her laughing and asked, would you have preferred him, baby? You can't identify your own strengths and weaknesses. I am glad I had the opportunity to study under him, even though I detested it at the time. I've annoyed you enough, senpai, and since I know it's risky to disturb you while you're eating, my students and I will be leaving. After finishing his 9th bowl, Asura said, I can't wait to see how strong your students are. He then left the money on the counter and said, you 3 enjoy the rest of your day, before he vanished. Wow, I never knew how much people respected sensei, said Kasumi. I knew he must have been good to be a Junin with his own team at his age, but to the point where older Junin call him senpai. They saw that Emi was drawing something on a napkin that almost appeared to be a symbol of a clan. It smelled of old people and cats, but they only saw one cat, a very fat cat that was sleeping on the counter, and it didn't seem to mind their arrival. That is so cool, Ryu said with a smile on his face, and it gives me an idea, he said, taking his teammates by the arm and dragging them to a shop that sold weapons and armor. Ryu called out, Yo Gramps, and an elderly man entered the store, frowning at the greeting. What do you require? He grinned at Ryu upon realizing he had company. I was wondering if you could design us some light armor with this one, he said with a grin. The 3 agreed to meet later to pick up their armor, so they parted ways for the time being. For the future Tsukikage, of course, he said with a smile after taking their measurements and telling them to return either tonight or early tomorrow morning. Asura said, summoning jutsu, as a small one-tailed fox materialized in front of him. Hey, Ichiro, are you prepared to train? After that, the little fox nodded and appeared a little shy, but when they first started, the fox was an entirely different animal. It attacked quickly, requiring Naruto to use his Sharingan to keep up with his movements. Both dodged and weaved the other fox's attack, leaving the training area in ruins. He scratched the little fox behind the ears and said, all right little buddy, I will see you again, which made him kick his back leg in pleasure. The little fox disappeared when he stopped. It was odd that the more tails a fox had, the more powerful it was. But the little one was the 3rd strongest fox. Only the 9 and 8-tailed foxes were stronger, and none of them could ever match the Kyuubi because they were made from his power. There was something about the one-tailed fox that reminded him of a baby Kurama. The old man appeared happy to see the 3 genin when they returned to his shop that evening. He gave them each a box and then produced a bundle, saying, I am proud of you, Ryu, so I have some gifts for you and your teammates. They are made with a special metal that can be manipulated with the user's chakra, especially elemental chakra, he said as he opened the bundle to reveal the weapons. He looked at their astonished expressions and said, A little bird told me that you three are going to take part in the Chunin exam. While Emi was examining the daggers, Kasumi picked up a small katana, and Ryu grabbed the twin blade with the expression of a child in a toy store. "You're the greatest, Gramps," Ryu yelled. When Kasumi said, "Thank you sir," she bowed her head. Before they left for home, they all said their goodbyes, and Emi followed suit. "Thank you," she said. Asura was waiting for his team at the village's main gate a week before the Chunin exams began, and they were all dressed in new armor. Ryu was wearing a black shirt with no sleeves, and he had 2 blades strapped to his back. The sleeves and the shirt were reinforced in place to protect important areas. Kasumi was also wearing something similar, with a jacket that stopped halfway down her belly, the sleeves stopping at her wrist, and she had a katana strapped across her waist. Emi's outfit was similar to the other two, except that her arms were bare, and she was wearing shorts, fingerless gloves, and 2 long daggers across her waist. All of them had an odd symbol over their hearts. "Have I overlooked something?" He looked at his team and asked. "We are a team and we are the greatest team, and when people see us they will know," Ryu said with a grin. Asura remarked, "Or they will know what I know." "What is that, too?" Ryu inquired. "That you 3 are idiots." When Akane's team arrived, he grinned and said, "You know sensei, you are not a very nice person," with a frown. "I didn't think that even you would make your team wear uniforms," Akane replied. He shrugged and said, "No, they chose to do that on their own." "Well, I think it is a good thing, it builds team unity." "Are there any other groups going?" Asura asked, sounding casual as he scratched his chin. She replied, "I think so," and they set off, though it took them longer than it would have if he hadn't been traveling with a group of genin. A few days later, they reached the Hidden Leaf village, where they saw that a fight was already in progress. A man with a long scarf on his back was holding up a much younger boy by his shirt. "Hey guys, look at the Catman. I wonder if he has his own superhero theme song," Ryu said as he began to approach them, calling back to his group. The man yelled, "Who the hell are you calling Catman? Who do you believe to be Catman? However, I believe that cats preferred playing with string rather than dolls and touching young boys," Ryu grinned. Retorting, "This isn't a doll and I don't like touching little boys." "You're not a Catman. Let me guess, you are his sister," he said, observing a blonde girl standing in astonishment that someone would say such things. "That's not what it looks like from where I'm standing." "Yes, but how did you find out?" she asked, appearing somewhat taken aback. "In my experience, only 2 kinds of girls, a sister and a girlfriend, would stand next to a man who looks like this without laughing." He put up 2 fingers and said, "I know you're not his girls for 2 reasons." "What are those, then?" As her brother grew more and more irate, she smiled and asked. She blushed a little as he dropped 1 finger. "One is the obvious, you're too pretty to with a guy like him," he said. "And the other is he likes little boys." He yelled, "That's it, you have insulted me for the last time," and fell away from the young boy. Still grinning, he said, "Are you sure? I thought I just got started?" And was seized by the cat, like man. "Although I'm not into guys, I'm honored that you find me attractive. If I were, they would be the ones running around looking like a huge cat." Kankuro lifted his fist to strike Ryu in the face, saying, "I'm sure there's a daycare around here. You should be able to find boys more to your test there." Kasumi approached them while holding her katana and remarked, "Kitty has a bad temper, maybe he needs to be neutered, maybe that will fix his attitude." A red-haired boy with teal eyes appeared behind them and said, "That's enough, Kankuro. You're an embarrassment." He approached the Kankuro and said, in a low voice that was audible to all, "I will kill you if you embarrass me again." His gaze was fixed on Ryu and Kasumi, but he remained silent for a moment before saying, "Let's go," and the 2 followed. She then gave Ryu a headshake. "What are you doing in hell?" she called out to him. He said, "I'm sorry," with a terrified expression. "Happy to say, thank you, my name is Konohamaru." "No problem," he said, massaging the back of his head where Kasumi had struck him. When he eventually took his hand off Emi's hand, she walked up and struck him in the head. "Why did you do that?" she said in the same bored voice, "Because I felt left out," as a boy with blonde hair ran around the corner. He looked up after saying, "There you are, Konohamaru," and asked, "Kasumi?" She said, "Hello Naruto," with a small smile. "Are you acquainted?" Ryu inquired, glancing between them. The dark-haired boy soon showed up, looking surprised to see her. "Yeah, we met during the mission in the waves," she said sheepishly. "Well, it was good to see you too, but we have to find our sensei." "Are you sure it was wise to leave your team like that?" Asura and Akane asked as they headed toward Hokage Tower. She asked, looking back with some concern. No, but I am sure someone will bail them out if they get into trouble, he said casually. Are you confident in your group? As they walked through the tower's door and up the stairs, he rubbed his chin and said, No, and Akane tried not to topple over. They knocked on the door upon hearing the welcome. Hello. We're here to sign our teams up for the Chunin exam, Asura said to the youthful Hokage with the blonde hair. Asura left first, wanting to see how much had changed since his last visit, which was approximately 9 years ago. Very well, he said, drawing out a scroll and a pen, and they walked up and filled out the paperwork. He heard a young girl, who appeared to be a year younger than him, yelling, Leave me alone, and he went to investigate. She was among a group of young boys her own age. He grinned as he approached the group and said, You should listen to someone who tells you to leave them alone, especially if they're a young girl. Who are you? One of the boys inquired. He rubbed the back of his head and remarked, Me, that's not really here, or there is it. Another boy said, If you know what's good for you, why don't you leave? Are you trying to harm me? Since none of you are on par with me, he asked, still grinning, because if you are, that is not very nice or smart. But since I don't feel like fighting right now, I'm going to leave. He approached the girl and said, My name is Asura. Why are you telling me your name when my name is Naoko? She said, he would have had a younger sister if his family hadn't passed away because she had blue eyes just like. He smiled and said, There you go. Now they should leave you alone for a while anyway, before disappearing with her. You should never talk to strangers, but now I am not a stranger, he said. She asked with a hint of blush, Would you like to get food, as my way of saying thank you? He grinned and said, If it is ramen then of course. Where the hell is that bastard leaving us in an unknown village? Kasumi grumbled. Alright, we need to find all the ramen stands and we should find Sensei. When they finally located him, they halted when they noticed him conversing with a blonde girl. I detest the attention I receive from everyone. The only reason for this is that I am the Hokage's daughter, she said angrily. May I share a story with you? He put down his chopstick and asked. Sure, I guess. Once, there were 2 boys. One was brilliant, and the other was a total loser. For reasons he did not know, the loser was despised by everyone. He had no family to take care of him, and the girl he loved detested him. Then there was a genius who was adored by everyone, even the girl the loser loved, despite the fact that he was cold to everyone. At one point, he had a family, but by this point, his older brother had killed his entire clan. The genius passed the Genin test with flying colors, while the loser barely passed it. What use does it serve to tell me this? Let me finish my story, he said with a smile, because these 2 boys were alone and had a bond that no one else had. They became friends. They viewed one another as best friends and competitors who were both striving to achieve their objectives. The genius desired retribution, while the loser aspired to become the Great Cage. Because of how quickly the loser's powers were developing, their friendship deteriorated. They witnessed the loser's strength during the Chunin exam, as his abilities repeatedly astounded everyone. After defeating a genius from a powerful clan, he went on to defeat a monster that threatened to murder the girl he loved. Everyone thought the genius had defeated the monster, but in reality, he was growing envious of his friend's abilities. When he saw his brother again, he had finally had enough and realized that he didn't care about him. Instead, he was only interested in the loser, who was despised by everyone for the same reason. In the end, the loser left the village to bring his best friend back, while the genius left in pursuit of power. Finding his friend was a challenging journey, but once he did, Asura lost memory of what transpired. The loser of a big fight was unable to bring his friend back. Soon after he got home, he went to train to get stronger so he could safely return with his friend. After 3 years, he returned a stronger man than any of them had ever imagined, and during the following few years, he looked for his friend and discovered that he had killed his brother. He waited for him to return home because he had completed his mission. However, it never came to pass, and the loser quickly discovered why his friend had discovered the truth. His family, not just his brothers, had been murdered by a different man acting on orders from the village, and he intended to exact revenge on the village for stealing everything from him. When the friends reconnected, they discovered that they shared more characteristics than the genius would like to acknowledge. She hangs on to everything he says. Like what? She said. They both detested the villagers and lost everything in the name of the community. One of them hated him because they hated him, and the other hated that their happiness cost him everything. The primary distinction between the two was their methods. One sought to demolish the village, while the other sought to alter it in the way the populace perceived him. He sacrificed his dream for the friend that everyone once adored but now detested, even though they all loved him now for everything he had done for them. What made him do that? If I can save my friend, how can I become a cage? He asked. The moral of the story, however, is that you have the ability to alter how others perceive you. Do something to make the Hokage your father if you don't want to be known as his daughter, Asura grinned. With a look of amazement at him, she said, I have one question for you. What is it? Is the story accurate? When he smiled and said, yes, I know them both from this rather sad tale. It can make you laugh and it can make you cry. He was struck on top of the head with a load whack. I'll bring you to tears. He was dragged away from his unfinished ramen with tears streaming down his face by an irate voice. He exclaimed, but my ramen, while everyone gaped. A slack voice said, your brother has been looking for you, as Kakashi emerged from his book. Are you participating in the Chunin exam, Kakashi? Sensei? As she watched him being hauled away, she inquired. No, he said. So why is he present? He is here for the exam, his students are taking part, he said, turning the page. Students, what do you mean? He is a Chunin. She exclaimed in disbelief, he can't be any older than Naruto and Sasuke. This is not the first time he has been to this village, he came here about 8 years ago. Why? He became the youngest Chunin in history and then the youngest Chunin to take the test. His abilities, if I had to guess, would be comparable to those of the cages. So he is nice, powerful, and cute. What a combination. The cries of, my poor uneaten ramen, could still be heard as Kakashi smiled and said, be careful who hears you say things like that. Most of all, your father, he thought. Sensei, why did you tell her the story you did? Kasumi inquired. Recalling the ramen he had left behind, he remarked, it was something that she needed to hear. Well, since you three ruined my meal, I am going to ruin your week up until the exams. The other two looked horrified as she stopped letting go of her sensei. He looked around and smiled when he saw who he was looking for. Wait right here, he said, approaching the young man wearing green spandex. What do you suppose he will do to us? When their sensei returned, he was accompanied by a boy with bushy eyebrows and a bowl haircut, and Ryu asked, sounding as though he was about to cry. 1. On .1 sparring competitions will be held, followed by winner versus winner matches. How many laps do you think the losers should have run around the village? The winner receives a prize. He turned to face the boy beside him and asked. He said, how about 500 laps on our hands, with fire in his eyes? With a sly smile on his face, he said, sounds good. 500 laps on your hands, taijutsu only, no weapons. No, I will allow you all to choose who you want to fight. I choose spandex, yelled Ryu. Asura said, don't hurt him too much. Don't worry, I won't, Ryu said, grinning and cracking his neck. Asura laughed and said, I wasn't talking to you, his smile fading. Ready, go. Ryu got up and rubbed his chest after Lee disappeared and reappeared in front of him, kicking him. He could feel the kick even through his armor. I'm really sorry, did I do too much? He sounded sincerely sorry as he asked. Asura grinned and said, don't be, he needs to learn a lesson. What would that be, then? Glaring at his sensei, Ryu asked. Not to underestimate your opponent. What a most youthful lesson, he said, approving Asura. You will teach the winner of the next fight that same lesson also. The fight did not last long, with Lee easily defeating Ryu after he got up to attack but was immediately knocked back down. After Kasumi won the next fight, she decided to take on Lee. She wasn't going to be duped by his appearance. He defeated Ryu and was the most proficient in taijutsu of the three of them. Lee assumed his stance, and she did the same, hoping that her speed would give her the advantage, but he was stronger and faster than her, making it clear that he was simply a better fighter than her. Asura said, that's enough Lee, you have won, and she stood up. What would you like as a prize? Sensei, Ryu said, gesturing to Lee, how do you think we can defeat a genius like him? Look at his hands, I'm sure he's the first at the training field in the morning and the last to leave at night every day, am I right? He said icily. Don't be so rude when you say someone is a genius, because you are implying that they were born with the talent and not that they worked for it. Yes, sir, was his response. So Lee, what is it that you want for winning? He bowed and said, give me permission to train with you guys today. Very well, Asura replied, let's start with the 500 laps on your hands. Are you serious? Kasumi inquired. Lee was the only one who was excited to complete it, shouting encouragement to the others as they completed their laps. Very, now get to it before it becomes 600, they all said. Asura simply nodded as Might Guy observed the students and said, the flames of youth burned bright in them. It took them many hours to finish, and when they did, everyone but Lee was exhausted on the ground. He said, what is next, in a passionate voice. The same goes for the rest of your team. I have something exciting planned for tomorrow. That's all for today, but you are more than welcome to join us tomorrow, he said to Lee. Guy gave him the thumbs up and said, "We will be here," and Lee appeared to be the happiest man alive. Lee inquired, "What time shall we be here?" Asura said, "I don't know, what do you think, Guy?" "Sunrise," he said, his teeth gleaming in the sunlight, and he seemed to be sitting behind the sun, even though it was still an hour before sunset. "Okay, you heard the man," Asura said before disappearing. They were shown to the hotel where they would be staying by Lee. After a long day of training, they all accepted the invitation to dinner. After Asura made a few hand gestures and said, "Summoning jutsu," a small fox materialized on the 7th training ground. "Yes, boss," he said, waving his tail. The little fox ran off after saying, "I want to check on my team for me real quick," and Asura lay on the ground, gazing up at the sky and remembering the times he used to train here. The return of the little fox did not take long. "Sorry, boss, I was followed," he said, lowering his head. "By who?" he asked, but as soon as Naoko entered his field of vision, his query was solved. "Hi, Asura," she exclaimed with joy. He picked up Ichiro and petted him, saying, "What are you doing out here? It's not safe for the Hokage daughter to be out here alone at this time." "But I'm not alone, you are here," she said, grinning at him. "True," he chuckled. He sat next to him and said, "Can I pet him? He is so cute." He picked him up and showed her his face, saying, "This is the face of a killer, he is not cute." He was even more adorable as his large brown eyes sparkled in the last of the light. She grabbed him and gave him a tight hug. He made no attempt to move when she placed him in her lap and began to pet him. "Traitor," he said to the fox, who gave him a quick glance before lowering his head back onto her lap. When he felt 2 chakras approaching them, the sun had nearly set. "Naoko," someone said. She called out, "Naruto, I am over here," and Sasuke and Naruto appeared. Naruto asked, "What are you doing out here?" before glancing at Asura, who was frowning. "Who is this?" he asked. "His name is Asura," she said with a smile, "and this is," glancing around, she saw that the small fox had vanished, which made her pout. Seeing his forehead protector, Sasuke inquired, "So Asura, are you in the exams?" "Not really," was his response. The frowning Sasuke asked, "What does that mean?" "My students are in the exams and I am sure that you have met them," he said with a grin. "Very funny, you expect us to believe you have students and you don't look any older than us," Naruto said with a scowl. "I guess you two don't remember me, it was almost 10 years ago. I wanted to play with you two and your friends, but you guys didn't want anything to do with me. You called me Cyclops, I believe, that is when I took the exam," he grinned. She glared at her brother and his friend and said, "It's true that Kakashi Sensei told me about it, or the part about him taking the exam, not that you guys were mean to him. Anyway, you guys should start heading back, we would want anything to happen to the children of the Hokage and one of the 4 remaining Uchiha." Sasuke said, "What do you mean 4? There are only 3, as he looked at Asura. Without arguing, they all began to depart as it began to rain. "Whatever you say, my point is, it's not safe, you never know what's out here," they said. The 3 genin sat in silence at the hotel, wondering where their sensei was. After a while, Kasumi asked, "How did sensei know that we couldn't beat that Lee guy?" "Maybe he saw him training earlier," Ryu said, referring to Lee as a sensitive topic. He claimed that the most embarrassing thing that had ever happened to him was being thrashed by a fool wearing green spandex. When their sensei hadn't returned after a few more hours and it was now leaking outside, Kasumi became concerned and informed the others that she would go look for him. "Don't be so rude when you say someone is a genius. You are implying that they were born with the talent and not that they worked for it. Look at his hands. I am sure he is the first to the training field and the last to leave every day, am I right?" He was a powerful ninja, and she had never seen him train, but he didn't seem to like the word genius, so it must mean he trains hard. She didn't know where to begin her search for him, but then she remembered something he had said. He was most likely at the training grounds because she never saw him train, which suggests he trains after training them. She began to sprint in the direction of the space they had occupied. When she noticed something in the distance, she stopped and hurried to see her sensei sitting there motionless, with the rain streaming down his bare back. Had he noticed her, he would have stood up, but he pretended not to. She stood there in awe of her sensei's unadulterated power as he displayed his hand, which had chakra gathered in it in a perfect sphere, and slammed into the tree, destroying it. He gathered his belongings and disappeared. From behind her, she heard Asura ask, "What are you doing out?" "I was looking for you, I thought you might have gotten lost," she said swiftly. "Now why would you think that?" She turned to face him and said, "You aren't the most reliable person," to which he smiled. She felt the heat rise in her face and was unable to look at him as he grabbed her and pulled her close. "Okay. I guess that's fair," he said. That he didn't seem to notice pleased her. They both disappear and then reappear at the hotel. Asura said, "Good night," as he went into his room. With her face still red, she replied, "Good night," and was relieved that it was dark enough for him to see. When Asura's team returned to the training grounds they had visited the day before, they were all so terrified that they were unable to eat because, in most cases, his use of the word fun was a nightmare for them and only fun for him. They didn't want to know what was in the bundle their sensei was holding when he arrived. Guy, who they assumed was his team, soon met them. In addition to Lee, there was a man with dark hair and eyes that were so pale lavender that they made him appear blind, and a girl with brown hair tied up in buns and brown eyes. With a disgusted look on his face, the boy said, "You can't be serious, we are training with these failures." Neji, that is a most unyouthful thing to say, Lee scowled. Guy struck his nice guy pose and said, "Lee, you're right, training with new people gives you a fresh perspective. So, my young friend, what are your plans for today?" Asura said, "First and foremost, I want you to meet your target," opening the package that his team had been shackling in terror. A small fox then appeared, and they were all at a loss as to what to make of him as he tipped his head back and forth, examining them all. With a sly smile on his face, he declared, "The team that successfully captures him and brings him to me will receive a prize, and the team that doesn't catch it, well, let's just say you don't want to know." Tenten said, "You can't be serious, you are not going to make us catch that fox," and Guy simply grinned at her before she dropped her head. Asura placed the small fox on the ground and stepped back a few paces, saying, "Ichiro, make sure you don't overdo it. You only have 2 hours to catch him, and you will start on my signal." Neji glared at the small fox sitting between them all and said, "How weak do you think we are giving us 2 hours to catch a stupid little fox?" "Careful what you say, Hyuga, you don't want to make him mad," he warned. "You all will start, now." The small fox remained motionless as Neji approached it. His expression changed from one of interest to one of rage, his eyes grew icy, and his posture became more menacing and aggressive. Ryu taunted, "What wrong, tough guy? I thought you said he was just a stupid little fox," as Neji retreated a step at the chakra spike. Asura grinned and remarked, "If you all just stand there, nobody will win." The little fox simply hopped out of the way before Ryu ran between Neji's legs, past Lee, and jumped over Tenten. "You know, Sensei, you're right," Ryu said before diving to catch him. "What the hell, bastard?" "Sensei," said Kasumi, "that is not a fox. A fox can't do that." Asura continued to smile and remarked, "That's not all he can do." Ryu lifted his face from the ground and asked, "Can you catch him?" The small fox ran up to Asura and sat at his feet, saying, "Yes, watch. Ichiro, come here, boy, see." With a chilly smile, Kasumi said, "Sensei, you truly are a bastard." Tenten exclaimed in surprise, "You guys talk to your sensei like that?" Slowly, Emi said, "If it's true you can get mad," as she approached the small fox that was sitting at Asura's feet like a submissive dog. Asura remarked, "You guys realize your time is ticking away and I am sure Bushy Brow and I can think of many fun things for you all if you can't catch him," as the small fox started to run into the trees followed by the 6 genin. Guy questioned, "Do you think they will catch him?" "No," Asura said, unconcerned. "I didn't think so." In the woods she and her teammates were closing in on him, and the little fox was just sitting there watching them, but he evaded their attempts just like he did every other one. She began to question why their sensei would pit them against a team that was so hard to defeat. With just 2 bells, it was similar to the bell test. There was no other way for them to catch the furball, so she knew what they had to do. Kasumi turned to face her team and stated, "We have to find Lee and his team." "Why?" Ryu exclaimed, glancing startledly away from her. "We have done something like this before." "The bell test," was Emi's response. After she nodded in agreement with Emi's statement, they both turned to face Ryu, whose head dropped in surrender. As they ran off in search of Guy's team, they discovered Lee massaging his flushed face, Tenten covered in dirt, and Neji looking angry while the small fox perched on his head, appearing innocent. Her question to herself was, how can something so cute be so devilish? The little fox jumped out of the way when Ryu lunged at him, causing Ryu and Neji to collide. Ryu grinned and said, "Thanks for breaking my fall." Neji yelled, "Get off me," and pushed Ryu away. The sarcastic remark, "Fine, that's what I get for trying to be polite." Kasumi said, "Look you guys, we are not going to catch him on our own. I am sure that our sensei already knew this," while the small fox sat on a rock and watched them. As Neji scowled at the small fox, Tenten questioned, "So then why would they have us do this if it is impossible?" "Because that is the kind of twisted mind that bastard sensei has," Ryu, who was now competing with the little fox for attention, said. It's not impossible, but we have to work together. It's like this bell test we had to take. He told us that if we didn't get a bell that we would fail and have to go back to the academy, she began before Neji interrupted her. That's great for all of you all, but what does this have to do with anything? It has everything to do with it. There were only 2 bells and 3 of us. The whole test was set up in a way that made it so we would work together, but that is what he wanted us to do the entire time, she said. Lee jumped to his feet. What are we waiting for? Lee asked, his eyes blazing with youthful fervor. When Ryu lost their staring contest to the little fox, he yelled in exasperation. As the little fox slept, they sat plotting. Once everyone was aware of their responsibilities, they took their places and began working on the plan. Lee rushed toward the sleeping fox and nearly fell when he saw it. The little fox woke up and yawned as he stretched, and Lee quickly closed in on him. The young fox leapt aside and began to run, but Ryu blocked his path. The young fox then took off in a different direction, and Neji leapt in front of him, picking him up but dropping him as soon as he was bitten. Emi lifted the Ichiro, his small back paws and tail hanging down, and his head and front paws resting on her arm. The girls exclaimed, "Cute," as soon as they saw the small fox and rushed back to Asura and Gai-sensei. He grinned as he said, "Very good, but you're all late," and the students appeared to be ready to kill. Gai said, "You all did well, my youthful friends," while posing. Asura nodded, "But you guys have confirmed what I believed," she said. With a hopeful tone, Ryu inquired, "And what is that?" His expression shifted from one of serious contemplation to one that would make the most formidable ninja run in terror. "You all are incompetent," he said, striking the good guy pose. "And since you all failed," he said. "Well," he said, grinning once more, "it seems that you guys are in lock today. It seems I am needed elsewhere." He stopped when his gaze landed on a massager bird. Guy gave him the thumbs up and said, "Thanks for letting us warm up with you this morning. I will take over training your students while you are away." Asura said, "You 3 heard him, you're with him today, have fun," before disappearing. Tucked away in a mountain range high on a mountain peak, through the dense fog, a man wearing a fox mask emerged. He cut his thumb and placed his palm on the mountainside. A door then materialized, and the masked man entered the passageway that had opened up in front of him. It led to a spacious room with a table and 12 chairs in the center. The symbols for each village were repeatedly displayed in front of each seat, encased in a circle made up of all the village symbols. The letters TWPC, which stood for Tactical War Privation Council, were in the middle of the table. The TWPC was a secret that was even more closely guarded than an S-class secret. Only its members were aware of its existence. To help prevent a repeat of the last war, TWPC was established soon after it ended. There were additional chairs on the room's outer edges. Only the most senior member could access the other doors leading out of this room, one of which contained the TWPC's records and the other of which contained comprehensive records of every individual in the village, including every man, woman, child, and pet. 2 other people were waiting there before the masked man, including a big shirtless man with tattoos all over his arms and back, black glasses, and no hair. When he saw the man in the mask, he smiled cheesily. The man said, "Yo Killa," and then he swigged from a bottle concealed in a paper bag. He turned to face the second person in the room and said, "Hello Shin. San, Aya. San," in a cool tone. She had purple hair in a ponytail, but he wasn't sure if that was her natural color or if she had dyed it that way. She had an Anbu tattoo on her left shoulder, and Shin had his on his chest. Her eyes were a stunning shade of bluish silver. She wore the Hidden Mist village symbol on her left shoulder, while the other village symbols surrounded her arm. Shin was enamored with a secret lightning village. When they were in the room, none of them had on a forehead protector, because they were non-existent and the TWPC alone had complete records on these ninja. The TWPC's shinobi were referred to as ghosts. They have the ego to go along with their title as the greatest shinobi in the entire world. All had been in the Anbu at one time or another, if not now, and the majority were 1 level up from the cages. "Why the hell do you always wear that mask? I know you're ugly, but you're not that ugly," Shin chuckled. Coolly, Aya remarked, "I'm sure he's better looking than you." Asura sat between the 2 ninja without saying anything. After an hour, ninja from all over the world occupied every seat along the edges, and after a few hours, elders from the ninja villages occupied every seat in the center. The final council member signed the scroll and sent it to the record keeper at the end of the table. Danzo, who was seated at the head of the table, queried, "Well, does anyone have any concerns before we start into the real reason we have called this meeting? Not because of the village, but rather because of your tenure on the council and how well you were regarded by the other members. You were given more weight the closer you were to the front of the table." After a silence, Danzo repeated, "Very well, on to business." A man from the hidden sand village sat to Danzo's left and said, "It looks like the Akatsuki have begun carrying out their plans, but my intelligence hasn't been able to determine what that is yet. I think I have a contact that believes he knows what they are after, but we still can't act rashly until we know for sure," the Tsukikage said coolly as he sat right next to Danzo. In response to the Tsukikage's comments, Danzo stated, "We can minimize our casualties if we send a small platoon and take them out quickly." Permission to speak, Asura politely requested as he stood up. Everyone was shocked to learn that this ghost had actually said anything during the meetings. Instead, they had simply listened to the specifics and followed instructions. He was deaf, though, and not just any ghost. "Very well," acknowledged Danzo. Asura attracted the attention of everyone in the room by saying, "If you allow me to do this my way, and then there will be no need for any of us to die." "And how are you going to go about doing that?" came a man Asura had never seen before. Asura asked, utterly disregarding the question, "Who are you?" "I am Shinzu, a council member from Hidden Lightning Village," he proudly declared. He asked calmly, "Does it really matter as long as the job gets done?" The Tsukikage said, "Shinzu Sama, you should know who you are speaking to. That is the Sharingan no Shinigami," fixing the young councilman with his gaze. He asked calmly, but there was a hint of fear in his voice, "The same man who took down the Uchiha clan single-handedly. I want a team of my own choosing, and everything else is a need-to-know basis." The man from the village of Hidden Sand questioned, "And if you fail?" Asura calmly remarked, "Then you will have plenty of other capable shinobi to finish the job." "Very well, all in favor of allowing Sharingan no Shinigami deal with this problem," Danzo stated at the head of the table. "Vote in favor of this course of action," all 12 members said. Tsukikage inquired, "So who will make up your team?" Saying, "Shin and Aya, out of all the ghosts, they were the only ones who didn't avoid him. Despite Shin and Aya's best efforts to hide it, he was able to sense all of their fear." "Very well, you three have your mission, now down to political agenda," the man on the council of the Hidden Sand Village said. "What shall we do with the Hidden Sound Village? There are rumors going around they are headed by Orochimaru, who is a member of the Akatsuki." When the Tsukikage said, "That won't be a problem, he will be dealt with along with the rest of the Akatsuki." The representative for the Secret Lightning Village inquired, "And if they still wish to follow the groundwork Orochimaru has lain down? They will be treated as all clans or small villages that threaten the peace that we have worked for. They will be eliminated," Danzo replied coolly. He then turned to Asura, "After you have disposed of the Akatsuki, we will send a massager of peace to the Hidden Sound Village, and if they refuse us we will send you and your team to clean up." Asura said, "Very well," and bowed his head. After Danzo said, "If that is all, I send word if we learn anything new." The ninja in the room waited for the council to clear, and then the shinobi started to disappear one by one until only Aya and Asura Shin were left. Calmly, he said, "What I need you two to do is to come back to the Hidden Leaf Village with me," and they left the council room, packing it shut. "Why?" inquired Aya. He grabbed them both and said, "Something they want is there, so that is where we will start," before teleporting outside the Hidden Leaf Village. A young boy with dark hair appeared in front of them in a puff of smoke. With a start, Aya asked, "Is this how you actually look?" "No, this is just one form I take to stay hidden." Shin inquired, "So what do we call you?" "Asura," was his response. Aya remarked, "Asura, it suits you," then they disappeared. "Keep an eye open, and if you see anything at all call me before you do anything," he said. As he entered the village, the sun was lowering, and he pondered whether his students had finished for the day or were still in training. Because they aren't the ones who witnessed the bloodshed, felt the loss of loved ones, or saw the final moments of calm before the ensuing chaos ended in eerie silence. He genuinely detested attending those meetings where those old fools don't think twice about eliminating a clan. He was personally accountable for the murder of numerous political leaders and 4 clans. He discovered that he had not even realized he had walked to the memorial stone. He scrolled through the list, not specifically searching for a name. The names of those closest to him were not listed, but he read the names of those who had sacrificed as much as he had for this village. Since the people never existed, the world would never know that they were unable to comprehend what they had given up. A nice voice said, "Looking for some that you have lost?" He continued to stare at the stone as he said, "Yeah, but I want to find their names won't be on here because no one has realized their sacrifice and no one but me will ever truly know." "That sounds like a heavy burden to carry the memory of unknown fallen heroes," the elderly man remarked, putting his pipe to his lips. Asura turned to face the former Hokage and remarked, "I will gladly bear that burden for them, as it must have been difficult for them to give up everything and their names won't even be remembered for it." "My boy," he said with a smile, "you are wise beyond your years." He looked at the elderly Hokage and grinned. "I had to grow up quickly. I always wondered how things would be now if things had started off differently, but I think I might have found my answer, he said. Is it what you thought it would be? He turned from the man back to the stone without saying anything more. Yes and no, I think I would have been happier, but I don't think I would realize how lucky I truly was unless I experienced what I did. But it wasn't all bad. I am sure there are those who have had it worse than me. I just haven't met them yet. I mean, I had the honor of meeting some great heroes, but, he said. The old man's statement, I am sure that you are or will be someone's great hero, made Asura smile. You know, at first I was fighting to fix the past, but now I am fighting for a better future. I have found those worth fight for. The third said, a shinobi can only be truly strong when he has something to fight for, as he dispersed. There once was a man born a monster, lived his life a hero, but soon realization of the awful truth dawned on him. He was forger of new worlds, but in order to do so he had to destroy the old one. Everyone he hated, everyone he loved, everyone he never knew. Bearing the sins of all men, it was something he was more than happy to bear if it meant a better tomorrow, said Asura. The third person asked in confusion, what are you talking about? The third turned to face Asura again. I guess it doesn't matter, I just wanted to thank you for everything, she said. He laughed as he asked, why is that? Then he disappeared. I am sure one day you will find out. Well, good night, Sarutobi. Sama, he said. His students seemed to have been waiting for him to return because they were dozing off in the common area when he got back to the hotel. 2 clones materialized without a single hand signal, and each Asura picked up a student and carried them to their room. He went to bed thinking that perhaps he would give them the day off tomorrow. The following week went by swiftly, but during that time, Asura's team noticed that he was acting oddly, rarely smiling, and that he always seemed to be thinking about something. As a result, training sessions became even simpler. And if he ever came back at night, it was usually long after they had gone to sleep. Occasionally, they would ask him what was bothering him, and he would always smile and respond, nothing, nothing at all. Asura had just been briefed on what his TWPC subordinates had learned about the Akatsuki, and it appeared that his suspicion was correct. They were heading to the Hidden Leaf village. However, they had deployed multiple units, which intrigued him. It appeared that they were attempting to assemble as many of the Jinchuriki as possible. It was the night before the Chunin exam, and Asura had returned to the hotel earlier than he had all week. This time, however, he would kill them all, regardless of their numbers, so that no one else would have to perish. He didn't even feel his team's chakra signals in the hotel, and it took him a minute to realize that it was too quiet and still too early for them to be asleep. He went out to look for them. He did so quickly, and they soon found themselves sparring at the training ground. It seemed that there were others who were watching his pupils. Yo, a cool voice said from a tree overlooking the training area. His response was, hello Kakashi. Senpai, without glancing up at the tree. So how long have they been out here? He asked. I don't know, most of the day, only stopping to get food, but today is not the first day. I noticed that they have been stay out late for the last few nights. Kakashi responded with a sluggish voice. He smiled at his students and said, so why are you out here? Someone should keep an eye on them, Asura said, feeling a little bad about it. Well, I have to get going. Kakashi replied. Asura heard a book close, then a puff, and then Kakashi disappeared in a cloud of smoke. A few minutes later, he caught sight of something intriguing. They were heading to the training ground with Kakashi's team. Hey there Kasumi, Naruto yelled. Along with the rest of her team, she paused to check who had called. Sakura frowned at her teammate's response to the foreign kunoichi, while Naruto grinned and walked up to her. Oh, hi Naruto. Sasuke, Sakura, Naruto said. As their fellow genin turned their backs on them, Ryu said, hey, what about us? Sasuke asked coolly, what about you? Which infuriated Ryu, but he took a deep breath. Sasuke gave Ryu a look that would have made most people frown, but Ryu smiled in response. So why do you two keep sniffing around her like some kind of lost dog? It's obvious you two like her and she doesn't feel the same about you, Ryu shot back. Ryu smirked and asked, did I hit a sore spot? The great Uchiha, not used to hear he can't have something he wants. Or does he want it because he can't have it? Sasuke was growing more and more irate with each sentence he said. If she liked someone it would be a better man than you, he concluded, giving the irate Uchiha a friendly pat on the back before turning to go. Before anyone realized what had happened, Sasuke lay on the ground, staring up into Asura's cold blue eye. His face was hard, and the killer intent leaking from the young Chunin made them all want to flee in terror. Ryu, watch out, Kasumi said as Sasuke charged Ryu with a Chidori. He said in a calm, natural voice, what the hell do you think you are doing, trying to kill one of my students, which was worse than if he had yelled. Sasuke stared at Asura. You think just because your little ego got hurt it gives you the right to kill a man with his back turned to you? I never thought the brother of Itachi, one of the last Uchiha, would be such a coward. Asura helped Sasuke stand up. A name does make you special, it doesn't make you better than others, and people who believe it does are fools. They're mad they can't get glory of their own, so they take the glory of those who came before them. Who are you to lecture me, an unknown ninja from an unknown village? Replied Sasuke. A flash of crimson appeared in Asura's visible eye, but the smile did not reach his eyes. You don't get it, he replied with a sigh. Tell me, Sasuke, what do you want to be known for? Your name, your action, and who do you think will remember you? Sasuke did not respond. I once knew a man. He started off as a hopeless loser and a self-proclaimed super pervert. He will probably go down in history as one of the most powerful ninja ever born, but that is not how I will remember. I will remember him because he installed in me the idea that we can have peace in this imperfect world. I will remember he died so that we could live. He died a hero. A hero, that's how I want to be remembered, even if it's only a few who see me as a hero. Now how do you really want to be remembered? I want you all to think about it. Let's go, his teammates. The following morning, the three of them were anxious because they had no idea what to anticipate from the impending test. All they knew was that they needed to report to room 301 at the academy. After their sensei guided them to the front door, they were left to fend for themselves. As they crossed the threshold and ascended the stairs to the second floor, they saw several of their fellow genin attempting to enter through a door. I thought we were in 301. This is only the second floor, said Kasumi. Genjutsu, was Emi's simple response. What? Ryu inquired. Emi explained. Genjutsu has been placed on this room, and she whispered, release. Asura's team dispelled the illusion and proceeded up the stairs while everyone else looked around. When they opened the door to enter, they were immediately overwhelmed by how many people were there to take the test. They heard a boy with a bluish-gray coat, red markings on his face, and a dog in his coat say, wow, I didn't think there would be such pretty girls taking this exam. Emi simply turned to him with her typical expressionless face, and Kasumi gave him a feeble smile. However, they simply kept moving forward. After a while, Sakura appeared somewhat alarmed as she followed Naruto and Sasuke into the room, both of them appearing somewhat battered. None of them had forgiven Sasuke for attempting to kill Ryu, so she turned away as they turned to face them. The great Uchiha and Namikaze rejected by a girl. Who would have ever thought, the boy with the dog said, and they heard a sudden outburst. Sakura said, I bet you she is sleeping with both guys on her team, a little louder than before. It's okay. Sasuke.kun, Naruto.kun. She is a slut that plays with guys' hearts. The voice said, troublesome, and Ryu started to approach them, but she grabbed his arm and shook her head. Ryu stopped, but he kept glaring at them. She grinned a little because at least one person in this village did think poorly of her at the moment. That is most unyouthful thing to say, they heard someone say. They knew who it was before they even saw the man with the bushy eyebrows and green spandex bowl cut. You guys are making a lot of noise, said a man with silver hair and glasses. With a callous tone, Sasuke inquired, do you have a problem? No, but they do, he said, gesturing to the group behind him, all of whom were glaring at him. Hello. My name is Kabuto, and I can tell you anything about everyone in this room, he said with a smile. How are you able to do that? Naruto inquired, gazing in awe. He said, with these, and produced a pile of blank cards. Okay, said Naruto doubtfully. Tell me who you want me to look up, and I'll prove it. Kabuto grinned as he spoke. The boy with the dog remarked, how about those pretty girls over there, ignoring Sasuke and Naruto? Sasuke waved amiably at him and glared at him. But first do their teammate, he said. But why, him? The dog boy complained. I don't care about him. Kiba, shut up, a blonde girl interrupted. Well, sorry Ino, for wanting to know about the only girls with the ability to resist the princes of the hidden leaf, Kiba said with his arms crossed. Wow, this guy is impressive. His name is Hayate Ryu. His strong suit is taijutsu, but he has a high leave for ninjutsu, but low genjutsu skills. He has done 30 D ranked missions, no C ranked missions, and 2 B ranked missions, and one of them he took the lead. His sensei is, well, isn't this interesting? Kabuto grumbled. What? Everyone inquired. Kabuto looked up and grinned. I heard about this guy, but I didn't think he was still so young, she said. Sasuke retorted, yeah, we met him, but he doesn't seem that impressive. He was the youngest genin in history, the youngest chunin, the youngest junin by the age of 6, and the youngest Anbu captain ever before he was 8 years old. This was prior to you all even enrolling in academy. Itachi was the youngest Anbu captain and the fourth was the youngest junin, both of whom were more than twice his age. However, aside from that, not much is known about him. This news shocked everyone, including Asura's team, who already knew about him. However, hearing it presented in this way made it seem even more impressive, especially when you consider that he is compared to the shinobi world's supposedly strongest cage. He took out another card and said, "Well, you guys wanted to hear about the others on his team. Next up is Kai Emi, who has a moderate level of ninjutsu and genjutsu, as well as the same missions as Ryu in taijutsu. The final member of the legendary Hisashi clan, Hisashi Kasumi, possesses a high level of ninjutsu and also possesses good taijutsu and genjutsu. And all three of them already possess multiple elemental jutsu skills. So they pose the greatest risks?" Kiba inquired. He grinned and added, "As you two know, but Naruto and Sasuke scowled and said, sorry too soon for jokes. No, I would say either the Sand Shinobi or Hyuga Neji and his teammate Rock Lee," he said. A frightening man with scars, wearing a long black coat and a bandana with the hidden leaf symbol on it, said, "Alright you brats, shut up and take your seats." They followed his instructions, and Kasumi ended up sitting next to a boy who had a ponytail that stuck up as if he was going for the pineapple look. He appeared to really not want to be here, and she assumed that he declared what his fellow shinobi were doing to be troublesome. He put his head down on the desk and said, "This is such a drag, to no one in particular." She was right, it was him. She saw that Emi was sitting next to the boy she thought was Kiba, who seemed to want to talk to her but was unable to speak, but she wanted to laugh when she saw Ryu, who was sitting next to Sasuke. It seems that he decided the Uchiha would like the silent treatment too much, so he was talking to him non-stop. The Uchiha looked like he wanted to kill. "I told you to shut up, you brats," and everyone fell silent. "My name is Morino Ibiki, and I will be proctoring the first section of the Chunin exam," I said. "The guidelines are straightforward. Pay attention, I won't say it again, I won't respond to any inquiries, and you will all keep quiet. According to the first rule, you all start off with a perfect score. If you give a wrong answer, you lose points. However, if one team member receives a 0, the entire team fails. Second, you and your team will fail the test if you are caught cheating 5 times. Each time you cheat, you will lose 2 points. Third, the 10th and final question will be presented to you with 10 minutes remaining in the test. You have an hour, so start now." "Thanks sensei," Kasumi thought to herself as she cut her thumb and made a few quick hand signals, and a small kitten appeared on her lap who jumped on her shoulder. Kasumi quickly began reviewing the rules in her head, especially the one about cheating. The room was filled with sentinels to ensure that they didn't cheat, but if they truly didn't want them to cheat, they would lose more than 2 points for being caught cheating. Ryu was certain that his team was aware that they were supposed to cheat on this test, but he still thought he was going to cheat, grinning to himself, even though he knew they were supposed to cheat when they were receiving the rules. When she saw someone writing, Emi copied the pen's movement on her own paper. She kept her eyes down so no one could see them, but they looked around the room for any pen movement on paper. Beyond the academy from a nearby rooftop, Asura took a seat at the academy. "Yo," he heard Kakashi say as he took a seat next to him, "Are you concerned about your student?" "Are you concerned about yours?" Asura retorted, "I don't know, but I have taught them the best way I know how, and from here on out is seeing if they know how to use what I have taught them." Asura laughed at this remark, recalling that evil cat that the genin seemed to have to chance down every other day. "Yes, if they fail that means I'm stuck doing more D-rank missions," she said. "I guess that is true," he said at last. "You know what?" "What?" As he read his book, Kakashi said, "I had 2 sensei when I was younger, and they torture and drive me crazy. I promised myself that when I became a sensei, I wouldn't treat my students that way." As he watched the academy, he grinned and said, "But now I know why they did it." Kakashi remarked, "Because it made you stronger." "No, because it's fun as hell," Kakashi said, nodding in agreement. Asura opened the scroll he had on his leg after a bird landed on his arm, and the paper had only the word, "Ramen," written on it. "They know me too well," he thought, grinning. Kakashi gave that Asura a curious look. Naruto explained, "Some friends want to go get ramen while they're in town for the Chunin exam. Would you like to join them?" "Sure, I haven't eaten yet," Kakashi said as he got up and they both leapt to the street below, making their way to Ichiraku Ramen Bar, the best ramen stand. When they got inside, 2 people were waiting. A bald shinobi who had finally covered all of his tattoos and a purple-haired kunoichi. They said, "Hello," but when they saw Kakashi, they stopped talking. Asura grinned and said, "He is okay, dude. This is the best copycat ninja." When Aya turned to face Asura, he simply grinned and sat down. "I wonder what the legendary copycat ninja looks like that mask," she said, smiling at him. "Don't worry, I will see what is under your mask and I will see what under your bandages," she said. Shin picked up his bowl and remarked, "We heard we have some friends heading this way. They said they will miss the exams but they want to be here for the celebrations." Asura grinned and said, "That's good, I will have to go out and greet them properly when they arrive, as a bowl of ramen was placed in front of him and Kakashi. Aya was staring at him out of the corner of her eye, and when he picked up his bowl, she started to smile, but he turned away while he was eating. She looked angry, and Asura and Shin slid away from her. Either Kakashi didn't notice, or he was a very skilled actor. Returning to the exam, it's time for the 10th question, and this one has a different set of rules than the previous 9. Ibiki told them to pay attention. First, you don't have to receive the final question, but if you don't answer it, you and your team fail the test. So why don't we choose to respond to the last query? Ibiki scowled in response to Sakura's question. With a smile that could rival Asura's, he said, because if you choose to hear the 10th question and you get it wrong, you don't just fail but you can never take the test again, but it won't affect your team. If they get it right, they can pass. Yet, if you choose not to answer the last question, you can still take the test at a later time. Therefore, the answer to this question is up to you. Ibiki looked around, and as the field shrank from over 150 to about 42, one by one, people began to raise their hands and leave the room with their teammates. This is your last chance. Is there anyone else who would like to withdraw? Ibiki asked. Very well then, you all pass, he said with a faint smile, and no one raised their hand. What? Hold on. What about the 10th question? Yelled Sakura. That was the 10th question, reported Ibiki. Are you truly so thick? Sakura scowled at Ryu as he grinned. So you were aware? Ibiki inquired. Yes, my sensei constantly put us in situations like this. He would make one choice better for one person or something that might seem bad for you but would be good for the team as a whole. Are you attempting to ascertain whether we think of ourselves or our team? Very good, and I am sure you figure out that the point of the other 9 questions. You wanted to see if we could gather information without being noticed while being watched, Kasumi replied. He grinned at her reply. If I do say so, it was rather obvious you wanted us to cheat with how the rules were set up. Ibiki was about to respond when someone burst through the window. Well, it didn't matter how the rules were set up, I was going to cheat either way, Ryu said, laughing. Maggots, pay attention. Hey Ibiki, you are losing your touch. There are a lot of them left. A woman with light brown hair yelled at the remaining pupils. Ibiki said, no, this year's batch are smarter than normal, from behind a banner with the word Enko written on it. Well, it doesn't matter because at least half of them will be gone by the time I'm finished with them. The woman they assumed to be Enko said, for more information, meet me at Battleground 44 tomorrow at 10, and then she disappeared. Asura's team was happy with themselves and wanted to find Sensei as soon as possible so they could tell him the good news. They all left the room after Ibiki said, shaking his head, alright, you all can go, after taking down the banner and noticing the broken window. They saw him walking and conversing with the masked Chunin Kakashi. Sensei, you know what? They said as they rushed toward him. When he said, there is an all-you-can-eat ramen buff that just opened up, his eyes went glassy. Emi said, no, and his head dropped in dismay. We passed, Kasumi said, giving him a quick hug before releasing him. Very good, I am sure that Kakashi Senpai will take you out to celebrate, he said thoughtfully. Sensei, complained Kasumi. Why don't you guys want to go out with Kakashi? Senpai? He sounded perplexed as he asked. Ryu replied, no, we want you to, and Emi nodded. He inhaled deeply. They dragged him down the street, Kasumi hanging one arm, Emi on the other, and Ryu pushing him in the back. They went to a barbecue place, and although he didn't show it, he was very pleased with his team, watching them joke with each other. It was amazing how much things changed. It seemed like yesterday that they didn't like each other. But that means that I have to pay, Asura said, not sounding happy, but he gave in under their gaze. Fine, he said, finally, after they dragged him down the street. Right, Sensei, Ryu said, jolting him out of his reverie. I'm sorry I was in my happy place where I cannot hear you three, he said with a grin. When Ryu said, you still are not a very nice man, he frowned a little. He said, I was just saying that we will blow through the rest of the exam, with a hopeful expression. He gave an honest response, saying, no, it only gets more difficult from here on out. He grinned at her, making her blush a little. You know, bastard. Sensei, you are a killjoy, Kasumi said, pouting a little. He said, you three enjoy yourselves, and stood up. You won't abandon us with the bill, will you, Sensei? Emi inquired in her typically composed tone. He faltered under their stares, saying, well, of course not, you see I left my wallet's eye. Okay, I'll pay the bill, he said, reaching into his pocket and dropping some cash on the table before leaving, but as he was about to do so, someone bumped into him, and he looked down at Hinata, whose face turned bright red as he reached down to help her up, and he thought about her dying in his arms by his hand. Without noticing Asura, Kiba asked, "Hinata, what's wrong?" The other 9 rookies soon followed. Asura apologized to Hyuga Haim in a courteous manner. "Who are you? What actions did you take against Hinata?" Kiba yelled. "As for who I am, that is none of your concern, and, as for what I did to Hinata, I was merely being careless and bumped into her," he replied while turning to Kiba. When Ino said, "You must be here for the exam." Calmly, he replied, "Yes and no, I have already passed the Chunin exam." "So, why are you present?" she inquired. A chilly voice from the rear of the group said, "Because he is here with his students," Sasuke said. With his typical bored tone, Shikamaru inquired, "When did you pass the Chunin exam?" The only people who did not appear surprised by the news were Kakashi's students and the slothful ninja. "Nearly 10 years ago," he said with a smile. He continued to smile and said, "Yes, this isn't the first time we've met either. I had a great time coming up here to take the Chunin exams, but as much as I would like to stay and talk, I have business to attend to. Goodbye." He heard Ino say, "He's not bad on the eyes," and he smiled as he continued down the street. He heard someone crying as he passed the park he used to visit when he lived in the village, and he turned to see a little blonde girl sobbing on a swing. He approached her and knelt next to her. "What's wrong, Naoko?" he asked, giving her a kind smile. "The stupid council," she uttered while crying. "What took place? They're trying to force me to marry someone I haven't met in another village," she cried out. "They said they need to form an alliance or something." She nodded, and he stood up and disappeared. "If I can take care of it, promise me that you will stop crying," he said, raising her head with his thumb. Danzo's house. Danzo opened his door to find someone there, but since they didn't even bother to cover up their significant chakra, he was certain they weren't there to fight. "What are you looking for?" As a young boy appeared in view, he inquired. When Asura said, "You know why I am here," calmly, "I am sure I don't," Danzo said. "Do you recognize Naoko Namikaze? How about her? You are true to marry her off to my village, according to a little birdie. The small bird also expressed her happiness to me. However, that little birdie told more than that. If you understand, there are a few ghosts involved. Don't try to use that tiny Sharingan on me, it won't work." "What gives you the impression that I can assist her?" Danzo spoke in a calm voice. When Asura said, "Tell the others it is not necessary and I will make sure that is true," she began to leave. "Why are you concerned, and who are you?" Danzo inquired. "It really doesn't matter, does it? You get your alliance and she doesn't have to marry someone against her will. Everyone is happy," he said before disappearing into thin air. "I wonder what I should have for dinner. Ramen, barbecue, ramen, maybe I should cook something, maybe ramen." Asura was so focused on the chakra heading towards Battleground 44, also known as the Forest of Death. "Okay, I will have ramen, but what type? Miso, chicken, beef, pork, there is also seafood. I like them all so much." He was tackled in mid-thought as he heard, thank you so much, you're the greatest," and Asura turned to see Naoko. "Sensei, who is she?" He turned slowly toward Kasumi, who was glaring at him, and gave him a feeble smile. For the first time in a long time, he felt afraid and had no idea what he had done. Usually, when girls were upset with him, he had some idea what he had done. His heart was racing when he said, "She's Naoko," because he knew how painful that look was whenever Sakura had it. "Is she the cause of your frequent abandonment of us?" Kasumi's knuckles turned white as she asked. He didn't even finish his sentence, as if she wasn't even listening. "No, I have seen her when I wasn't with you guys, but it was my inn," he said. "What are you doing, Naoko?" He turned to see Naruto and Sasuke, and he recognized the voice. "Asura helped me out, I don't know how he did it but he did," she said, still giving him a hug. Coolly, Kasumi said, "I would like to ask you to get off of our sensei." "What's causing your envy?" Naoko asked with a devilish smile. "No," Kasumi said, blushing rapidly. She kissed him on the cheek and said, "So it won't bother you if I do this." He saw Aya looking as though she wanted to start laughing at the two girls who were staring daggers at each other, but she just said, "No, why would it?" her eye twitching to prevent herself from killing the blonde. He vanished, saying, "I have to go, so I will see you guys in 5 days." "Where does he believe he will be spending 5 days?" Kasumi asked in a furious tone. "Maybe he has another girl on the side," Ryu said with a smile. "What on earth are you talking about?" Both of them yelled at him. "Nothing at all," he said, his eyes wide with fear and perspiration streaming down his face. "He has his own harem," Emi remarked uncharacteristically. "Isn't Sensei different?" Kasumi spoke quietly. Naruto pouted as he remarked, "I still don't think he is all that special." You six ought to be on the battlefield. As Kakashi was reading his book, a voice asked from behind them. They all left, with Kasumi wondering what was going on with Asura. She had never thought of him as that kind of guy, but what if Emi was right? The thought made her face flush. In the middle of the forest saying, "Hello Kabuto," Asura approached the man bound to the tree chakra, enhanced rope. I wondered when they would stop playing around with me, Kabuto grinned. You're right, I'm not here to play, so let's go straight down to business, Asura replied. You too, it might be better for you if you run along while I have a little chat with our friend. Are you certain? Shin inquired. Very, Asura said, and although Aya and Shin wanted to see what was underneath the bandage, they decided it would be best to follow his instructions. His left eye stayed covered, while his right eye developed a Sharingan. Kabuto's smile vanished when Asura began to laugh, and his eye changed into something else. Am I supposed to be afraid of that? If I was, I would be afraid of Kakashi, he said. His eye was shut when he said, You think this is the same as Kakashi's? You couldn't be more wrong, and when he opened it, he saw something entirely different from anything he had ever seen. A Mangekyo Sharingan is what this is called. We can do this the easy way or the hard way for you, Asura smiled. It's on a whole new leaf. The genjutsu created by this is a bitch, and if you're lucky you'll end up in the hospital for a few weeks, and if you're not well, let's just say I can send your pathetic ass to hell 1,000 different ways. Kabuto said, I am not telling you anything, in any way. Very well, we will see what you won't tell me, Tsukuyomi, Asura replied. The Tsukuyomi universe, everything had turned red and black, and Kabuto was in the dark, strapped to a pole that was burning his back. I control reality here, he said, adding, we will be here for 70.2. In other words, I am God here. Kabuto remarked, this is just genjutsu, this is just a genjutsu, following Asura's sword stab. If that makes you feel better, keep telling yourself that, Asura chuckled. After being repeatedly stabbed with a sword for what felt like hours, Kabuto started to scream. However, each time he closed his eyes, the pain would stop and the hell would begin anew. So do you wish to talk yet? No, a panting Kabuto spat. Let's see if I can make you spill your darkest secrets, Asura said with a smile as more of him surrounded the appalled Kabuto. Well, we still have 71 hours and 59 minutes and 59 seconds for you to change your mind, he said. Kabuto's cries filled the empty dimension. In the actual world, when Aya and Shin saw that Kabuto was screaming in agony, they asked, what did you do to him? We weren't even gone for 10 seconds. Shin remarked, glancing at the lifeless Kabuto. Asura's eye returned to normal before any of them could see it. We are going to take out his other teammates and we will enter in the Forest of Death to make sure Orochimaru doesn't make his move until we want him to, he said. How did you treat him? Aya questioned him once more. He turned to see a snake slithering away Kabuto's last ditch attempt to save himself, but he would be dealt with soon enough. He didn't want to take, so I made him with a genjutsu, Asura replied, and they disappeared as instructed. Battleground 44. Sitting on the grass, Kasumi continued to think about their sensei, wondering why she cared about what he did or who he did it with. She kept telling herself that he was just her sensei and nothing more, and she felt foolish for being able to stop thinking about him. He was a bastard, so why could she stop thinking about him? He is not always a bastard, but he has his moments, a small voice said, but he is unreliable, but he is always there when you need him most. Kasumi, are you okay? Ryu inquired, appearing somewhat concerned. She smiled and said, yeah, I am fine. What is it? Ryu exclaimed, the guy with the strange cards just appeared and it seems like the proctor is going to let him have it, but he was disappointed that she had hurt him. What do you think sensei is going to be up to since we are going to be in here for 5 days? After taking a seat between Emi and Kasumi, he inquired. As Kasumi pulled her legs to her chest and looked down at her feet, Emi remarked, he might be out with his girlfriend. Ryu put his arm around her and grinned, saying, I am positive that is not true. I am certain he is extremely bored and wishes we were with him right now. All right, maggots, I want you to come up, get your scrolls, and proceed to your designated entrance when I call your group number. They followed instructions, and the entire process took roughly an hour. They all felt anxious at this point because they had only 5 days to locate another team with the other scroll they required and then make their way to the middle of the forest. Compared to yesterday, the other participants appeared much more frightened. None of them were grinning, and as they heard Anko yell, start, they were all focused on one goal. To complete this exam as quickly as possible. In an attempt to find someone before they were discovered, they dashed in at full speed. They barely had time to hear the screams of the test's initial victims. They all appeared to be wondering at the same time whether it was a team or something else that had captured them. They went on for what felt like hours, but no team was visible. However, they sensed that something was watching them. In any case, they didn't like it, whether it was another team or something that wanted to prepare their lunch. They hurried as swiftly and silently as they could in the direction of the presence ahead of them. Kabuto was one of 5 individuals standing and observing one another. He and his group were in front of 2 grass ninjas who were hidden. Before charging directly at one of the hidden grass shinobi, Kabuto whispered something to his teammates. His chakra glow hand struck the man in the heart, causing blood to spill from his mouth and sending him to the ground. The other man attempted to attack Kabuto, but he disappeared into the ground and appeared behind him, striking him in the back of the neck, instantly killing him. It wasn't until that very moment that the 3 of them realized what they were up against, and they watched in horror. "Kabuto, we are being watched," one of his teammates pointed out. "It's okay," he said, gesturing with his hands. He touched the 2 lifeless bodies, and they leapt to their feet before disappearing along with the others who had died just a moment before. Thankful that Kabuto did not kill them like he did those 2, Ryu asked as he fell to the ground, "What the hell have we gotten ourselves into? And to think Sensei did this when he was only 4. That gives a new meaning to the word badass." Emi said, "We can't stay here," and they sprang to their feet. They decided to set up camp for the night after moving until they could hardly see anything in front of them and they did not encounter anyone else. They took turns sitting up and keeping watch. In order to battle through the crunch time, they wanted to finish this quickly. Towers of Hokage Naoko thought she had seen Jiraiya Gigi when she ran up to her father's office, but he was rarely there. When he returned from his travels, he always brought her the coolest things. At least he was amusing about it. He is a bit of a pervert, but that was okay because she had learned that most old men were. "Hokage Sama," a male voice said, and she recognized it as Kakashi. "I think there is another person who is aware that the Akatsuki is approaching." She heard her father ask, "Who?" "Asura something he said makes me believe there is a chance that he is working with them, but I don't want to jump to conclusions," Kakashi stated. She overheard Jiraiya say, "Just to be safe, we might have to have someone keep an eye on him." Naoko refused to accept it. Asura was too nice to be involved in anything negative. Asura's strength made Kakashi jealous, but what about Jiraiya? Her father had always told her that he was among the world's strongest ninjas. She rushed out of the tower in search of Asura, but she was unable to locate him. Returning to Battleground 44 when it was Kasumi's turn to keep watch, she found it difficult to focus on her responsibilities because her thoughts kept returning to Asura and the kiss. Who the hell did that little blonde bitch think she was anyway? She asked herself. She tried to tell herself, "I don't like him, so why even care?" However, she began to doubt it herself the more she told herself that. As the sun was rising, they cleaned up before the morning even arrived so as not to leave any indication that anyone had been there for a long time. However, as they were about to leave, 3 ninja attacked them. 3 of their village's ninja were relieved that it wasn't Kabuto because anyone would do. The grubby blonde grinned and said, "We have been searching for you losers. I hope you still have your scroll because we have come to take it." Their opponents were in a daze, so Emi didn't even wait for him to finish speaking before making a hand gesture with flower petals dancing around them. "Let's go," she said as if nothing had happened. 3 other moon shinobi in Genjutsu were left behind when they all departed. They still had to reach the base with both scrolls in hand and everyone intact, so their mission was only partially finished even with the 2 scrolls. They were shocked to see how many people had already arrived by the middle of the second day, but even more shocking was who had not. Ryu looked around and asked, "Where is Kabuto?" "Maybe he just hasn't shown up yet though I thought he would have had both scrolls by now," replied Kasumi. Saying, "Hey, it's the Catman," Ryu pointed to the puppeteer. Kankuro glared at Ryu and declared, "I'm going to kill you the first chance I get." Ryu smiled and remarked, "I know what's wrong." "Yeah, you?" exclaimed Kankuro. "How long has it been since you touched a little boy?" "I know when you arrived you started touching the first little boy you found," Ryu replied. As Ryu laughed carelessly, Tamari thought, "This guy is either really strong or really stupid." "Your mouth is going to get you kill you of these days," Sasuke remarked, frowning profusely. Ryu grinned and said, "I didn't know why you cared so much," to him. "Stop annoying everyone," Kasumi told Ryu. "There is only one guy I'm worried about pissing off, well 2 and neither of them are here," he said with a grin. Everyone wanted to know who would make Naruto bite his tongue, so he asked, "And who would that be?" Everyone but Neji and Gaara appeared intrigued, and he declared, "One is the scariest man in the whole world," with a horrified expression on his face. "Sensei and the other is that Kabuto guy." "Kabuto?" Sakura inquired. "You fear Kabuto more than Sasuke-kun." Ryu shot back, "Sasuke can't kill a man, bring him back and kill him again," and everyone stared at him, unsure of how to react. One of the Chunin said, There is no way to bring the dead back. Kasumi defended her teammate by saying, no, he really did. He killed 2 ninja from the grass village and then used some jutsu to bring them back to life. We saw Kabuto chasing 2 grass ninja over to us, but they didn't look dead to me, Naruto stated. That because he brought them back to life, you idiot, Ryu replied. You idiot, Naruto yelled. Who are you calling an idiot? Gazing between the 2 men, Kasumi inquired, are we 3? Teams began to emerge. Everyone who had shown up was lined up in front of their sensei, the 4th Hokage, and the 3rd Hokage after the 5th day. Hello, I am your 3rd Proctor Gecko Hayate, and too many of you have made it past the first 2 rounds, so we are going to have a preliminaries before moving on to the 3rd round, he stated. These preliminaries will be one-on-one fights. Rules: the battle ends when I say it does or one of the fighters is no longer able to continue. You all will be called at random. Everyone else moved to the balcony that overlooked the battle when a big screen appeared and stopped displaying a picture of Naruto with his name next to him and Kiba. Begin, said Hayate. Naruto prevented Kiba from preparing his jutsu by attacking him from all sides with his shadow clones. Kiba was only able to defend when one of Naruto's clones attacked him while he was making a hand sign. Kasumi heard Ino ask, did he really think he could beat the son of the great 4th Hokage? If he weren't the Hokage's son, would they still regard him as a talented ninja? What? Kasumi asked herself. The proctor declared, winner Naruto, while Kiba lay on the ground with his dog at his side. After a medical team descended and carried Kiba away for treatment, they once again looked at the monitor to see Ryu versus Zaku. Ryu said, I guess the people wanted to see a real ninja, and Zaku, grinning arrogantly, followed suit. The proctor said, begin, and Ryu looked closely at his opponent before noticing something on Zaku's palm. Ryu smiled and said, so that's the key to your jutsu, I bet, and Zaku's smile disappeared. Very well then, Ryu said, before charging him with a speed that matched Lee's. With the exception of Asura, Kasumi, and Emi, everyone was staring at Ryu as he stopped behind Zaku and used water torture jutsu, wondering what he would do. With Kasumi and Emi covering their faces and Asura grinning proudly, he put his finger in his mouth and then in his ear, making Zaku jump in surprise and almost knocking everyone else down. Kakashi asked Asura, who was trying to control his laughter, what are you teaching them? He simply shrugged, fearing that if he opened his mouth, he would be unable to control his laughter. I'm just playing with you, okay? Ryu grinned and said, let's start this party. Why you will pay for that, the irate Zaku uttered. Okay, Ryu said, using his tremendous speed to kick Zaku in the chest before he reacted, causing blood to flow from his mouth. Zaku crashed into the wall, hit the floor, and failed to get back up. Everyone thought he was going to kill him, so Ryu began prodding him. Walk up, you haven't made me pay yet, Ryu said in a somewhat childish manner. The winner is Ryu, Hayate declared. Well, at least I won. I thought it would have been more fun than that, Ryu lamented, and Emi gave him a back pat to lift his spirits. They watched the next match, Sasuke versus Dosu, and as they walked to the battlefield, Dosu flashed his trademark arrogant smile. The only part of his face they could see was one eye. Sasuke tried to stand up but fell back to his knees after dodging Dosu's punch as the battle started. Look at the great Uchiha, what do you think of my jutsu? It sends sound waves through the air straight to your inner ear, throwing off your balance. This fight is as good as over. Sasuke made the hand signal, fire release. Great fireball jutsu, and Dosu attempted to avoid it but was unable to do so completely, catching his right arm and damaging the device on it. Still a little shaken, Sasuke stood up. Now it looks like it is over, Sasuke said. Fire release. Dragon fire jutsu. Dosu was struck in the chest and was unable to stand up. After Sasuke collapsed to his knees, Asura appeared next to him and healed him, allowing him to stand up on his own 2 feet while the medical staff attended to Dosu. Asura said, you have trained your students well, and then he reappeared beside Kakashi, grinning. Kakashi said, I could say the same to you from what I have seen, while glancing up at the Kasumi versus Ino monitor. With his eyes focused on Kasumi, Ino didn't hear her when she said, Naruto, if I win, can we go on a date? She leapt to her feet and walked to the center of the battlefield. Before the battle started, neither of them spoke. Kasumi had nothing to say to her, and Ino was too upset about being disregarded. Ino took the initial blow, but it was a water clone, and when the clone exploded, the water encircled Ino, allowing her to move. Are you sure you want to be a ninja? It seems to me that the only thing that you are focused on is getting the attention of a guy who has no interest in you, Kasumi said from behind her. Just give up, this match is over, you can't beat me. When Ino yelled, you think you have won, I am not done yet, Kasumi shook her head and then knocked her unconscious. As the water released Ino, she began to walk back to the balcony. When Emi and Sakura faced off in match 5, they both walked down, but that was about as long as the match lasted. 2 seconds later, she gave up with a dazed expression on her face, and by the time the look was gone, Emi had already returned to the balcony, giving Kasumi and Ryu AV for victory. Sakura asked, "Sasuke, how did you get up there so fast?" He looked down at her in confusion. She appeared to realize what had happened when her face flushed red and she walked back up in silence. "I have been up here, what are you talking about, Sakura?" she asked. Kakashi remarked, "You have trained your students very well," noting what Emi had done to Sakura. Ryu questioned, "Emi, what did you do to her?" Sakura turned a deeper shade of red as she said, "I made her think that if she gave up that Sasuke would take her out on a date, without trying to control her voice." Gaara and Kin faced off in match 6. He reappeared on the battlefield, surrounded by Gaara's sand. Kin strode down with assurance. Asura shook his head and remarked, "This isn't going to end well for her." "What do you mean?" inquired Kakashi. Asura declared, he is going to kill her, but Kakashi could say anything he wanted, so he crushed her in his sand. Tenten and Shikamaru faced off in the following match. Shikamaru won it with ease, but he calmed it down to be troublesome. Neji went to deliver the kill shot, but Asura disappeared between the two, blocking the attack. The next match was Hinata versus Neji, and it wasn't even fair. It seemed like he was doing everything he could to make Hinata look bad. She kept getting back up and refusing to give up. "That's enough, Neji. Are you really trying to kill her for something that she could not control any more than you?" Asura responded, "What has she ever done to you?" Neji simply turned and left without saying anything. Asura's hand began to glow golden, and he put it to her chest. Her eyes opened, and she sat up, appearing to be unharmed. As the medical staff transported her to the hospital to ensure her full recovery, he disappeared. To Ryu's dismay, Lee prevailed over Choji, and Shino defeated Konkuro. On a bye, Tamari made it through. He yelled, "Ah, Catman, now I can't fight you now," as he was being carried to the hospital. They all fell before the Hokage as Hayate went over the next test. The third exam is the tournament-style one-on-one combat. Each time you win you advance to the next round. Just because you lose in the first round doesn't mean you won't become a Chunin, but the opposite is true. You can win the exam and not become a Chunin, but the more times they see you fight the higher your chances become. The rules will be the same, the preliminaries, and it will be in one mouth. Asura had been out a lot again after the preliminary exams, and his team was on their way to meet him for training 2 days after the second exam. They hadn't seen him since, but when they woke up this morning, a note was waiting for them. They couldn't wait to see what he would teach them. He had instructed them to meet him at the ramen stand when they got there. The sight of a woman conversing with her sensei caused Kasumi to release some killer intent. The woman saw this and began to smile sweetly at her. "I'm glad that you all have made it. I will be assigning you all to a sensei until the end of the exam," Asura stated. "What, you are not going to teach us anymore?" Kasumi said in a terrified tone. "I will be training one of you. I want you all to have specialized lessons to make sure that you all are ready for this final round," replied Asura. "Asura, they don't look that incompetent," a deep voice said, and they turned to see a brazen man with dark sunglasses who was 6 feet 4 and covered in tattoos. He was a little scary. They all glared at their sensei and said, "Wait until you work with them. I want you all to meet Aya and Shin." With an eye toward Aya, Ryu inquired, "So who is with who?" "I will let you pick so you can have the joy of knowing you selected your own hell," Asura said without emotion. "I want Aya," Ryu blurted out. With a sly smile that made him doubt himself, she said, "Very well, but at least she's attractive," he thought. "I will take muscles galore," Emi declared in a tone devoid of feeling. Shin remarked, "I am not that big." "Yes you are, your muscles have muscles," Aya replied. Asura finished his ramen and got up, saying, "So it looks like you're stuck with me, Kasumi," before they all parted ways. After guiding her to a training area close to a lake, he said, "I want you to attack me with everything you have aimed to kill." She dropped into her fighting stance, and he followed suit, but it was Lee's fighting stance, which she had seen him adopt previously. "When you attack, you forget about your defense, so if you miss, you are wide open," Asura calmly explained, adding, "Try again." She attacked him, but he easily sidestepped her blow. The next thing she knew, a kunai was pressed to her neck. She tried to jump back, but she was unable to stop him from attacking him with water release, water dragon jutsu. Before she realized what was happening, he was making more hand signals, water release, great flood jutsu, and the water swiftly rose, but he stood there as the water engulfed them both. She attempted to exit the water, but a massive whirlpool dragged her back in. She lay at her sensei's feet, the water still present, and gazed up at him in wonder at the strong jutsu he had used on her. Those are just a few of the jutsu that I will have you master, he said with a smile on his face. Alongside Ryu and Aya her words were, let's see what you can do. With some concern, Ryu questioned, are you sure? She teased him by asking, what are you afraid of me? In an attempt to attack, he lunged at her and kicked her, but she easily sidestepped it. To slow, she tripped him and put a kunai to his neck. She smiled and asked, would you care to try that again? He knew he was going to have a long day. Earth release. Antlion jutsu, he thought as he leapt back from her and took a step forward before being sucked up to his neck in the ground. She approached him while giggling. Since you are standing right there, could you do one of two things? Ryu scowled at her. She questioned, and what would that be? 1. Help me out of here. Or, put on a skirt. Either one is completely fine with me. She laughed and said, you've got balls, I will give you that. With hope, he inquired, so does that mean you will? In your dreams, she remarked as she laughed and left. Alongside Shin and Emi, Shin asked, I assume your strength lies in genjutsu, am I correct? She nodded, and he said, all right, let's get started. She attempted to put him under genjutsu, but he thought he had dispelled it, so she tried to break it but was unsuccessful. At last he released it. Your genjutsu is good for a genin, but you have a long way to go before you become one of the elite. She attempted to subdue him again, but he kicked her, sending her flying into a tree. Lightning released. Thunder punch, he said, striking the tree just above her head, destroying it completely. You need to learn to be sneaky with your genjutsu, hide it within another attack, she said. At the end of the day, the genin crawled back to the hotel because they were too exhausted and sore to walk, while the junin laughed as they made their way back. In contrast to what they just experienced, they all believed that the previous training was a pleasant beach vacation, and the previous training was hell. After healing his students long enough for them to walk to their beds, Asura departed. While strolling through the city, he noticed that the Anbu was pursuing him, but he remained silent. He saw a small blonde walking a short distance in front of him. He smiled and said, hello Naoko, but his gaze remained fixed on the Anbu. Asura. Kun, she embraced him. He said, Asura. Kun, again. Yeah, she said joyfully, will you join me for dinner with some friends? He smiled and said, sure, I have a little free time, can I ask you something? She smiled at him and asked, yeah, anything. But he was wearing a serious expression that she had never seen on him before. He looked toward the Anbu that was pursuing him and asked, do you know why I am being followed? They think you have something to do with some organization, she said with regret. He grinned and said, thank you, to her. A few girls who appeared to be Naoko's age were inside the restaurant when they arrived, along with a few boys. Naruto was one of them. He leapt up and pointed at him, asking, what are you doing with my sister? Asura smiled. She invited me, she said. Naoko declared to the entire group, this is the guy the first told you all about, he is a Chunin and he has his own team. One of the boys smiled and said, what rank are you Naruto? He scowled at the child and declared, I am going to be a Chunin at the end of the mouth. He recalled finding Sasuke after he had killed Danzo and remarked, rank really means nothing. I knew a couple of genin considered among the strongest ninja in the world. One turned out to be an S-class criminal and killed a Kage. They exclaimed, a genin defeated a Kage, in awe. He said, then it was a genin who defeated him, but regrettably, nobody seemed to take notice of how strong genin could be. He sat there and listened to the children conversing with one another without eating anything. Occasionally, he was asked if he had ever killed anyone. Yes, I have killed my share of people. It is not something that I am proud of, but the longer you have been a shinobi the more lives you will take, he replied. A young girl with red hair inquired, how long have you been a shinobi? He replied honestly, for as long as I can remember, but he had to get up and leave. It was a pleasure to meet you all, he said as he stood up. The Anbu searched for the missing shinobi after he disappeared. The Anbu turned to see Asura seated. Look, I know you are following order, I get that, but do you know how annoying it is to be tailed wherever you go? He said, tell them they have nothing to worry about, I have no desire in causing the Hidden Leaf Village any trouble, before he even touched the ground, teleporting out of the tree. He should have killed his best friend, but instead he went to the Valley of the End, where he had actually lost him. Although he was scared to use his power, would things have turned out better if he had? What if that day had seen their deaths? He sat there remembering that day, putting his hand over his left eye, the eye he had taken to remind himself how easily it could have been him. It was quiet here, save for the sound of the waterfall. How Sasuke might have been chasing after him in an attempt to return him to the village. When he eventually stood up again, the sun had already started to set. He teleported back to his beloved and despised village. Ryu said, where did you go? As he entered the room. He lied and gathered his belongings to take a shower. Nowhere special, he said. Have any of you ever wondered what he is hiding under those bandage? Ryu inquired. Yeah, I noticed when I was training with him. I would try to attack him from that side and he was able to dodge it just as easily, without turning his head, said Kasumi. Maybe we should find out, Emi said while lying on her back and gazing up at the ceiling. In hushed tones, they discussed how to learn. Asura looked at his student suspiciously after leaving the restroom because he thought they might be planning something. He said, I am going to bed good night, as he backed towards his room, not taking his eyes off of them. He cautiously opened his door after feeling it behind him, looked inside, and then shut it. Kasumi inquired, what was that about? Maybe he knows what we are planning, Ryu muttered. Kasumi responded, that's impossible even for him, he was in the shower. Once they were certain he was asleep, they got up and cautiously opened his door. They assumed he even slept, so they moved as quietly as they could to his bed. When Kasumi cautiously extended her hand to take off the bandage, a hand suddenly grabbed her wrist, causing her to lose her balance and fall onto Asura. Her face flushed red as she stared into his vivid blue eyes. I knew you three were up to something, he said calmly, without emotion. Ryu inquired, how did you know we were quiet? They all walked out defeated, their brilliant plan having failed. That's how I knew, they said. They endured the hell that their respective senseis had chosen to subject them to over the next mouth. There was a festival the night before the final exam. In an attempt to gain the confidence to ask Asura to accompany her, Kasumi made the decision to do so that morning while returning from the train. Sensei, she uttered softly. He turned to face her and said, yeah, as they made their way back to the hotel. Unable to look at him, she said, well do you want to go to the festival with me? Saying, sure, I guess so, she hugged him and said, really, before rushing off with joy. I will see you later, sensei, she added. Without addressing anyone specifically, he asked, what was that about? It seems like she likes you, he said in a distracted voice. Asura questioned, why would she do that? I don't know, Kakashi replied, but I know she's not alone. Asura said, really, as she turned to face Kakashi. You really haven't noticed? Not really, he replied, and Kakashi followed suit. Kakashi asked, so where are your other students? Asura smiled as he considered the torment his students were enduring, his eyes glazed over. Training, Asura grinned in response. With a sweet drop on the back of his head, Kakashi thought, I feel like things aren't going well for them. A cry of, Asura! Kun, followed by a pair of arms encircling him, caused them both to halt. Kakashi said, hello Naoko, but his gaze was fixed on Asura. As an afterthought, she said, hello Kakashi. Will you accompany me to the festival, Asura, Kun? Kakashi smiled and said, think about it before you answer that, my young Asura. Kun. Asura gave him a perplexed look, and Kakashi whispered in his ear, what do you think will happen if you bring her along and you meet up with Kasumi? Asura reflected on their final encounter, saying, I'm sorry, Naoko. I already told Kasumi that I would go with her. You are going with her because her chest is bigger than mine, aren't you? She grumbled. Asura hurriedly exclaimed, wait, what? No, I am going with her because she asked first, but she still didn't appear pleased as she left, muttering something about not losing to that big-boobed bitch. Then Asura turned to Kakashi and asked, is Kasumi's chest even that big? Kakashi replied, for her age I guess, but I'm not an expert, and went back to his book. With a quick question, is Jiraiya Sama here? They both disappeared, but everyone knew where to look for him. Naturally, he was snooping around the girls' bathhouse, saying, hey Ero, Sama. We need your expertise, Kakashi said, and he turned, not pleased to be treated in this way. Asura said gravely, but keep in mind that this might be one of the riskiest missions any of us have ever undertaken, and Kakashi nodded slowly in agreement. Shining, Jiraiya said, sounds fun, so what is the mission? They watched Kasumi browse the kimono selection while they were outside a store. His chin was rubbed as he remarked, I would say it is rather large considering her age. Asura recognized this voice and turned to see Aya staring down at the three Chunin. What are you three doing? He asked. When Asura pointed to Jiraiya and said, he made us come, Kakashi nodded in agreement. After that, they both disappeared, leaving Jiraiya to face his destiny. To express their sorrow over the Sanin's passing, they visited the memorial stone. Asura and Kakashi bowed and Asura said, it's good to see you Ero. Sama, looking as though he had been snooping on Tsunade. Jiraiya grinned and remarked, she wanted me to tell you that you two were going to get away with it that easily. Well, she will have to catch me first, Asura asserted. Asura stepped from behind Jiraiya, her eyes widening as she asked, is that the case? With a furious expression on her face. The three of them looked in horror as he said, Hell release. Utter annihilation jutsu, and then his chakra suddenly dissipated. Wait, have I finished the jutsu yet? He asked, rubbing the back of his head in a childlike manner as they fell over. Stay back or I will release my ultimate jutsu, he said. She took a step forward. Waving, Asura said, well, that looks like my cue to leave, he said, vanishing, before disappearing into thin air. He is an idiot, Aya said, putting her hand to her face. She was shocked to learn that the tactical genius, who was among the most powerful ninja, was a fool. Kakashi said, or very clever, with his face buried in his book. Asura returned to the hotel, certain that this would be the last place she would come to look for him. When he entered, he saw Kiba, who appeared to have tried on clothes to improve his appearance. Asura asked, Dog boy, why are you in my hotel room? Kiba's face was dripping with perspiration. When Emi's emotionless voice said, Dog boy asked me to go to the festival with him, I felt sorry for him so I agreed. Kiba's head dropped in disappointment. What about Ryu? Inquired Asura. According to Emi, he is going with the Hyuga. Asura exclaimed in surprise, Neji, I never took him for that kind of guy. Ryu said, no Hinata, as though he didn't find that amusing. Hey, you can't get made, they just said Hyuga, Asura shrugged. So sensei, you are going with Kasumi, Emi replied. Asura grinned and rubbed the back of his head, asking, yeah, how did you know? Ryu dropped to his knees and said, Sensei, you have to teach me? Concerned by his student's peculiar behavior, Asura remarked, I thought I had been? How do you do it? Do what? Create your own harem. I don't have a harem. Yeah you do, Kiba responded. There is Kasumi, Naoko, Ino, and I am sure there are more that I don't know about. Sensei, you're not ready yet. She snapped at him, sparing Asura from having to respond when Kasumi arrived. He said as he walked to his room, no, but I will go and get ready right now, and she gave him a fierce look before turning to face the other two boys in the room. Asura took off his forehead protector but left the bandages on. He was dressed in traditional orange and black robes. Why did she snap at me when she wasn't ready either? Asura asked himself as he left his room after hearing the shower. Ryu exclaimed, Sensei is not wearing his forehead protector. His surprise was evident. Kiba said, why don't you remove the bandages? He grinned and said, I can, but then I would have to kill you all. Kiba laughed, you're joking right? No I'm not, Kiba said, pausing his laughter and displaying horror. He's scary, Kiba told Ryu. Ryu shrank at the idea. You know what is scary? There is a curse if you say his name 3 times, Ryu said. The lighter flickered as Asura grinned and said, I don't believe you. So Asura, is it true that if I say your name 3 times I will be cursed Asura? So what is the curse if I say it one more time Asura? However, Kiba laughed as he went to prepare, and nothing more occurred. They all heard a scream as the door closed. Ryu said, I warned him, as he stood up to collect Hinata. Asura sat down on the couch and waited for Kasumi to finish getting ready, grinning at his handiwork. Asura couldn't help but think about how stunning she looked when she eventually emerged from the restroom. She was dressed in a pale pink outfit with blue and green accents, and her hair was styled in a sophisticated bun on the back of her head. With a slightly anxious tone, she asked, what do you think? He grinned and said, you look great, and she looked up, blushing but happy. Thank you sensei. He rubbed his chin and remarked, I suppose you don't have to call me sensei for tonight. You can call me Asura. She whispered, Asura, and he grinned before standing up. Asura, what is your full name? I have only ever heard people refer to you by your last name, or is that your last name? Only I am aware of my last name, he replied. What about the Tsukikage? Not even he knows. Why not? What is so wrong with people knowing or using your name? Everything, but for tonight like I said I will allow you to call me Asura, he said with a grin. Asura was receiving glares from the guy and Kasumi was receiving them from the girls when they first started out on the street. Kasumi saw this, but Asura either didn't notice or didn't care. He simply strolled carelessly to the festival. He appeared to be preoccupied with something after a while, and she searched the area but was unable to identify it. He said, I will be back, before vanishing in a cloud of smoke and resurfacing beside Gaara. I understand what it's like to be despised and alone. Gaara's voice was like an icy wind as he asked, what do you know of my pain? But Asura was unfazed. Asura grinned at him and said, much more than you could ever imagine. Gaara, do you have someone you fight for? No, because I only love myself, I fight for myself, Gaara replied. Asura left him with that note, reappearing behind Kasumi as she searched for him. That is sad, you can only obtain true power when you fight for someone precious to you. someone you are willing to die for, and when you find that someone like that you will find a power you never knew you had, Asura said. Kasumi thought to herself, where did he go? Did he go? No, he wouldn't. She turned and struck him in the arm, saying, I wouldn't what? She pouted up at him and asked, why did you leave me? He thought, she really did look cute. Asura claimed, I had to help someone who lost his way, but she rarely understood what he was referring to. For someone his age, he always seemed so wise. She wasn't sure if she was dreaming, but every time she looked into his eyes, even when he smiled, she saw loneliness and pain. She recalled that he had said not too long ago, only I know my last name, which implied that his family had passed away. If the Tsukikage were unaware of his name, it meant that he was not from their village and that his family had died before he was 4 years old. After a few minutes of silence, she said, Asura, may I ask what your last name is? If I swear never to tell anyone. Not yet, but one day you will know, I am sure of it, he replied. Where would you like to eat? I am starving. She said, you're always hungry, with a shake of her head. In the midst of the celebrations, he began to pout, and she couldn't help but laugh. She grabbed him by the arm and pulled him to a charming little spot. It was a barbecue joint where you could watch the chef prepare your meal while amusing him. He heard someone say, Asura, and when he turned to see Shin waving at him, Aya gave Shin a headshake. When she angrily reprimanded him, leave him alone, can't you see that he is on a date? Kasumi became red in the face and revived Hinata. She pulled him around while he played various games to win her prizes after they had finished their meal. When nightfall finally arrived, they went to watch fireworks. She rested her head on his shoulder while the night sky was illuminated by bright lights, and she felt happier than she had in a long time. She felt as though nothing bad could happen while she was with him. Was she in love? She closed her eyes and relished her time with Asura. Asura turned to see Kasumi dozing on his shoulder as the last of the fireworks melted from the sky. He carried her back to the hotel after picking her up, wondering if the others had returned yet. When he got there, he was relieved that they hadn't. After setting her down on the bed, he went to his room. Shin was the person in his room. It seemed we have 2 days until they arrive and they are sending 2 teams instead of one. The first team is Orochimaru and Sasori, but the other 2 we haven't been able to discover the identity of the other 2, he stated. Asura said, no, we stick to the plan, as if he had already made up his mind. Shin cast a pitying glance at the young Chunin. Shin began, and if the plan fails in you, then I will just keep a promise I made a friend. It will have just been late, Asura said with a grin. Asura lay in bed thinking, there are only 2 days left, but he couldn't have asked for a better day, and there was always tomorrow. Shin disappeared. Finals. Each of you will draw a number and the number you draw will represent the slough in which you fight. Hayate pulled out a bucket as the 11 competitors lined up. And the winner of the 5th match will be healed and fight the remaining fighter, Hayate said. Kasumi 1st, 2nd, Naruto 3rd, Gaara 4th, Shino 5th, Emi Shikamaru 6th, Sasuke 7th, 8th, Ryu Neji 9th, 10th, Lee 11th, Tamari. Shin sat on her left, and Aya took the seat to Asura's left. Given their boasts about their students' growth, he wasn't shocked to see them here and was certain they wouldn't have missed it for the world. Naoko, who had left her father's side to watch the fight beside him, took the seat to his right. Asura could hear the double meaning in Shin's statement, so I see your girl is up first, and it seemed that Naoko could too, as she did not appear pleased. Naruto asked with a hopeful tone, Kasumi, will you go out on a date with me if I win? Grinning, she said, and if I win what do I get? Whatever you want, he replied with a smile. She wanted to know about her sensei, but it seemed that the closer she got to him, the more enigmatic he became. The only thing she wanted was the truth, which he was unable to provide. She lowered herself into her fighting stance and Naruto followed suit. I don't want anything, but I am always up for a good challenge, so if it will make you fight harder I will take that bet, she said. As soon as Hayate said, begin, Kasumi made a few hand signals, water release, great flood jutsu, and water poured out, filling the ground up to their knees. There wasn't as much water as Asura Sensei could do, which disappointed her. She continued to make the hand signals. Water release. Water clone jutsu, though, and 2 Kasumi appeared out of the water. Naruto grinned and thought, she is pretty good at it, but I can't lose. He made the hand gesture. Shadow clone jutsu, and 2 clones materialized. The only person who didn't seem impressed by this was Asura. While Kasumi and Naruto stood back and assessed each other, the shadow and water clones engaged in combat. She grinned at him after the clones had all been destroyed. She made the same hand signals and said, how about one more go? 2 more clones and 2 more shadow clones appeared for Naruto. The clones fought again. This time Naruto attacked the Kasumi who was standing back from the battle, but to his surprise, it was another water clone. Naruto landed on his feet after Kasumi kicked him from behind. He cut his thumb and then made hand signals, pressing it to the ground. A big toad then materialized, standing as tall as Naruto, and he smiled while standing on its head. "Impressive, but it's not good enough," she said, making as many hand signals as she could. "Water release. Water dragon jutsu," she said, and a huge dragon struck Naruto and the toad after emerging from the water. Naruto and the toad were both still standing when he said, "I must say you were better than I thought. I never thought I would have to use this jutsu." "What jutsu could she have stronger than the water dragon jutsu?" Shin inquired. Aya observed that Asura was grinning and remarked, "A genin, none, she is bluffing, isn't she?" Kasumi raised her hand and gathered her chakra into a perfect sphere. "I planted the seed, let's see if it has grown," he said. "That is my father's jutsu," Naruto exclaimed in horror. "How do you know that jutsu?" "I've been attempting to learn it ever since I witnessed my sensei using it a long time ago. He wanted us to be able to figure things out on our own, just like he knew I was watching when he performed this jutsu. He knew I would try to figure it out," she said with a confident smile. "I never understood why sensei never told us how to do anything. He made us figure it out. Though it was a trap." Kasumi made some quick hand signals, "Water release. Water prison jutsu," and Naruto saw it too late. "But now it is time to end this battle. I'm sorry Naruto, but you lose," she said, charging at him. After saying, "And the winner is Kasumi," Hayate let go of her jutsu, and the water disappeared from the field. "I never thought you would be so strong," Naruto grinned and said, "You beat me." They both left the field so that the next match could start. It was Gaara versus Shino, and they made their way to the battlefield. The battle was lengthy, neither shinobi gave an inch, but in the end, Gaara won, and a few Chunin intervened to stop Gaara from killing his opponent. "You were pretty good yourself. I was hoping to have won with the water dragon," Kasumi said sheepishly. Shikamaru remarked, "What a drag, I thought I would have more time before my fight," as Emi silently descended. "Did you know that while I was training her, I discovered something fascinating about her?" As Shikamaru descended onto the field, Emi had her eyes closed. Aya appeared perplexed, and Shin inquired, but Asura nodded. "Ino, do you think Emi is going to win or Shikamaru can pull this one out?" Sakura inquired. Ino smiled and said, "I'm not sure, but I don't think he will fall for her tricks," to Sakura's glare in return. "But he might think it is all too troublesome and he might quit." Hayate commanded, "Begin," and Emi opened her eyes to see a nearly fully formed Sharingan. Asura and Shin were the only ones not in disbelief. "This is going to be trouble," Shikamaru thought, "because I have never seen a Sharingan before, much less fought one." Emi's emotionless voice said, "You can give up if you want," looking him in the eyes. Shikamaru had to dodge. Fire release. Fireball jutsu. Knowing that most genjutsu users were not skilled in taijutsu, but he was also not, and there were many unknowns, such as what Sharingan actually did. He had to think quickly and identify her weakness quickly. Emi was aware that he was observing her, so she needed to beat him quickly before she ran out of chakra. Since she had seen his jutsu before and didn't want to be caught in it, she quickly made the hand signs, fire release, flame flower jutsu. He was able to avoid most of the attack, so he only needed her to waste her chakra with other jutsu. Emi decided to give it her all in this final move, shadow clone jutsu, and they both charged at Shikamaru. He caught one in his jutsu, but it was the wrong one, and the real Emi kicked him with everything she had left before her clone vanished as they both hit the ground. Shikamaru sat on the ground and remarked, "It seems like neither of us has it in us to go on." "It seems like you were right," she said, forcing her eyes to return to normal. The match that most had been anticipating, the Loud Moth versus the brilliant Uchiha, came next. "I give up," they said at the same time, Asura said, leaping down and healing them both so they could return to their seats. When they arrived at the field, Ryu was his usual boisterous self, but he appeared prepared for the Uchiha. They both assumed their battle stances, and neither of them had forgotten the time Sasuke had attempted to kill Ryu. When he activated his Sharingan, Ryu grinned and said, "Begin," running at Sasuke, who was able to avoid the initial blow and barely managed to block it. "Even with your eyes, are you having problems with little me?" Ryu asked in a tone reminiscent of his former self. Earth release. Antlion jutsu. Ryu countered with an X-block that grabbed Sasuke's wrist and threw him over his shoulder. "Shut up," Sasuke said, forming a Chidori. Sasuke was then drawn into the earth. The next battle was not as won. Sided as many had assumed, but Neji still prevailed. "Looks like I won, little Sasuke. That is what you get for underestimating me," Ryu said, grinning at the fallen genies. "There will be a 10-minute break until the second round begins," was muttering across the stands. "Do you believe Kasumi will prevail in the upcoming match?" Aya inquired. No, was his honest response. Why not? Shin inquired. Calmly, because it's Gaara, he said, after 10 minutes. Don't worry mother, you can drink her blood soon enough, Gaara said, startling Kasumi a little as they prepared to fight on the field. Begin, Hayate said, flooding the field as she had done in the first round, but she immediately proceeded to the water dragon jutsu. She was startled to see a big ball of sand after her jutsu. With a startled expression, the sand revealed a laughing Gaara. Let me prove my existence, by ending yours, she said. 3 clones ran towards Gaara, saying, water release, water clone jutsu, water release, exploding water clone jutsu, but none of them hurt him. Instead, he just began to laugh more. His sand struck her in the chest, and each time she tried to stand up, it struck her again, until the water disappeared from the field. She was no longer moving, and the sand slowly crept up her body. Asura seemed concerned, saying, now you die. Naruto had rescued her when Gaara yelled, but he was kicked and it landed. Naruto remarked icily, that's enough, you have won. With an angry expression on his face, he said, then I will have to kill you both, and Naruto assumed his fighting stance. A sandball began to form around Gaara, but Naruto wasn't going to allow it to happen. Rasengan struck Gaara in the chest, knocking him back into the wall. Naruto charged Gaara with a few clones, which he destroyed. The real one appeared behind him, creating more clones, all of which hit him at the same time, knocking him in the air, while one attacked from above, sending him crashing to the ground. How can I lose, and why this guy and others like him? Gaara yelled. Asura said, I can see the future and there are 2 for you that I can see, so that only Gaara could hear him. Because he is fighting to protect someone, he said, emerging in front of Gaara. 1 you die alone, or 2 you become the most beloved Kazekage, which path you take is up to you. Asura approached Kasumi to pick her up and asked, why didn't you take action earlier? With an angry expression, Naruto inquired. Then Asura disappeared. I did what needed to be done, don't worry, I will let her know you saved her, she said. Later on in the day, Sensei, I won the whole thing, Ryu declared as he entered the hotel room, but he was not there. He turned to look at Kasumi's room, where their sensei was present but not visible. Asura stood close to the front gate and asked, so you 2 know what to do, his face dead serious. The other 2 seemed alarmed by his icy demeanor, and they nodded before disappearing into the night sky to prepare for the day ahead. Asura was left behind, his blue eye now crimson as he watched the setting sun, and he disappeared silently. Asura was nowhere to be seen in the morning. It appeared as though he had not even slept in his bed the night before. The 3 of them were beginning to worry about their sensei and decided to go look for him, but they couldn't find him anywhere. They visited the ramen stand and any other food-filled locations on the training grounds, but it seemed as though he had simply upped and disappeared. They began to inquire as to whether anyone had seen him since last night, but one person they asked had not seen him, Aya, or Shin, and they began to have uneasy thoughts. Where did Sensei go, and why didn't he say anything to us? Kasumi questioned her teammates. They jumped when they heard Kakashi behind them. Last time I saw him was last night. He went to the Hokage's office, and turned to see him reading a book they usually read, but he was accompanied by a white-haired ninja they had never seen before, who had red paint marks on his face and very long white hair tied in a ponytail. This is Jiraiya-sama. Isn't he among the fabled Sannin? Ryu inquired with an air of admiration. I heard from Sensei that you are the strongest of the 3 Sannin, Kasumi said, glancing at the elderly creature. Jiraiya said, so he thinks I am stronger than Orochimaru, with a pleased tone. She looked back at Kakashi and said, but you don't seem like a pervert to me, which made Jiraiya collapse in disbelief. Do you know what he was doing in his office? Kakashi slowly shook his head. The previous evening Asura appeared outside the Hokage tower, walked up, stopped in front of the office door, and knocked on it, unlike most visits. Asura stood near the front gate and asked, so you 2 know what to do, his face dead serious. The other 2 seemed to be frightened by his cold demeanor, and they nodded before disappearing into the night sky to prepare for the day ahead. A voice yelled, come in, and the 4th was working on paperwork at his desk when he opened the door. Asura, what do I own this delightful surprise? I came just to talk if you don't mind, Asura smiled, and the Yondaime pointed to the vacant seat in front of his desk. Thank you, Hokage-sama. This is just a friendly chat, no need to be so formal, you can call me Minato, said the gentleman. You have always been my hero, and it is such an honor to talk with you, Asura said with a feeble smile. Well, being regarded as a hero is an honor, Minato remarked. However, I wanted to know if you were proposing my pupils to be Chunin, Asura inquired. What will you say to them, and why? No, I have something to do, so it appears I won't be around to find out. Where are you heading? Minato Asura said, not sure yet, while massaging the back of his head. I don't see the harm in telling you because you did assist my daughter. Yes, Minato stated, your students will be nominated to become Chunin. Asura said, thank you Minato, getting up and making his way to the door before stopping, leaving a bewildered Hokage in his wake. He returned to the hotel to find his students sound asleep, and he wasn't surprised because it had been a long day for everyone. He realized that he had never once told them that if he did, they would probably think he was dying or something. Time was running out, so he needed to make sure everything was in his favor. He was sure he could win, but there was a problem. He knew who the other two were, and they weren't pushovers, so he needed to do this alone. He couldn't afford to be against them. Returning to the present in the hopes that he would know something to help them locate their sensei, they headed to the Hokage's office, where Naruto and Naoko were conversing with their father. Hokage. Sama, said Kasumi hastily. What is it? He asked politely. Are you aware of Asura Sensei's location? The Hokage shook his head when Kasumi asked in a hurry. Since you are his students, shouldn't you all be aware of his whereabouts? Naruto inquired. What topics did you two discuss last night? Kakashi inquired. Well, he asked about his students, then he said something about he wondered if he would ever hear his father tell him he was proud of him, Minato was thinking. The words, wait, I thought his father, escaped Kasumi's lips as her eyes widened dramatically. How about his dad? Kakashi inquired. She responded slowly, he told me that no one else knew his last name, so he is dead. Minato said, you don't think, without pausing. I do, said Kakashi sadly. Minato stood up and said, Kakashi, you and Jiraiya go out to help him, and I'll be there in a moment. I need to talk to Sarutobi. Hearing the fear in the men's voices, Ryu asked, what's going on? But none of them responded, and Naoko took Kasumi by the arm. We'll let you do what you need to, father, Naoko said. The others trailed behind her as she left the office, and she turned to face them. I heard them discussing something called Akatsuki, she said. That Asura knew this group was approaching this way, and I believe he may have gone to meet this Akatsuki. Ryu stated, then we need to go help him, a calm voice said, we will come along too, and they all leapt back to see Gaara and his siblings standing there. Turning to face Naoko, Naruto said, you stay here, you're not even a genin yet. She began, but, the words, no you should stay here, were spoken by Sasuke. Emi put Naoko under genjutsu without saying anything. No, I don't want to, she said. Why are all of you here? Gazing at the new arrivals, Kasumi inquired. We saw Jiraiya and Kakashi off in a hurry, Sasuke replied. Ryu remarked, we don't have time to talk, and they set off in the same direction as Jiraiya and Kakashi, but they lost them. Summoning jutsu, Kasumi said, placing her palm on the ground, and a big steel gray cat with blackish blue stripes appeared. They followed it through the forest, but it didn't take long to catch up to Jiraiya and Kakashi, who were standing facing Shin and Aya. Kasumi said, what are you guys doing? We need to find Sensei. Shin said in a chilly tone, no you all are not passing this point, and Aya stood there appearing prepared to fight. Why are all of you children here? With a terrified expression, Kakashi asked. According to Ryu, we came to help, Jiraiya said, you fools go back, and the three Sand siblings, Ryu and Emi, came forward. The other ran past Shin and attempted to pursue them, but he had to avoid the sand that blocked his path. We will hold them back, you guys go find Sensei, Ryu said, drawing his two swords. The five ninja attacked the two, and although Shin and Aya didn't want to harm them, they couldn't let them pass this point. I never thought I would have to fight them, but then again I am dealing with you Orochimaru, so I shouldn't be surprised, Asura said coolly as he stood in front of four cloaked figures. You come out here to face us alone even though you know who we are. Orochimaru lowered his hat with the other three and said, what a brave child you are, foolish but brave. His gaze shifted from Sasori to Tobirama and then to Hashirama. With his gaze still fixed on the two former Hokages, Asura declared, as they are. They are no match for me. He added, I would have liked to see how the first two Hokages compared to my power. However, I suppose it's for the best because you can only imagine what would occur if I didn't control my abilities. Asura reached up and threw aside his forehead protector, exposing his Rinnegan, and his other eye activated a Sharingan. You seem confident in your powers, Sasori said coolly. You could say that, he said, and then he stepped forward, disappeared, and his fist smashed through Sasori's armor as if it had been made of paper. His new body jumped away, but he still had a good chunk of his upper body missing. Sasori summoned an army of puppets, and a golden fox head formed around him, and as the puppets rushed in, they were blasted back as if someone had kicked them, but Asura remained motionless. Orochimaru and Sasori were able to avoid the blast by using triple Rashomon, and when the smoke cleared, Orochimaru's defenses had been torn apart, but he and Sasori were unharmed. "It seems that you have a reason to be confident in your skills," Orochimaru commented with a grin. "It looks like we are going to have to stop playing around." Asura leapt to the side to avoid a blow from behind, and when he turned to face the third cage, iron sand began to pour from the puppet's mouth. In an instant, Orochimaru was standing where he had been, and Asura was standing where he had been. Orochimaru looked down and saw that a rod made of iron sand had pierced him. He spat up a new body as his old one hit the ground, and tree roots sprang up from the ground, tearing through Asura, but it wasn't him and Sasori. Asura appeared behind Orochimaru and struck him in the back with his jutsu, and he watched as Orochimaru's cells were being destroyed. "It looks like our time is running low, so I need to finish this quickly," he said, raising his hand to reveal a load screeching and a sphere appearing in the palm of his hand over his head. When Asura appeared before Orochimaru and stepped on his neck, he ducked the blows that Hashirama and Tobirama threw at him, saying, "You have no chakra left, so you cannot save yourself, but since it is you I will not risk it." When he saw that they were no longer alone, he deactivated his Sharingan and transformed into a staff, passing it through Orochimaru's head. Now that he had only two to worry about, the Hokages were no longer his only concern. "Sensei," he said as he heard a call. Glancing over his left shoulder, he saw Kasumi standing there with Naruto, Sasuke, Kakashi, and Jiraiya. Asura turned back to his opponents. They all saw that his bandages and forehead protector were on the ground, and Jiraiya and Kakashi saw the remains of the other Akatsuki member. "I just want you to know I am proud of you and the others," Asura said. When Asura said, "You guys are just in time to see my last jutsu, I am going to end this on a bang," his laughter was audible. Demon Release. Annihilation Jutsu. A tremendous amount of chakra was building up, and Kakashi and Jiraiya, sensing the danger, grabbed the young ninjas and fled to safety. "What about Sensei?" Kasumi exclaimed. "We can," but before she could say another word, there was a loud explosion, and Asura grabbed the two cages in the confusion, and they were all gone in an instant. When they returned, the Sand siblings Ryu and Emi had just arrived, so they picked up Asura's belongings and went back to the others. "You all wait here," Kakashi said as he and Jiraiya left to see what had happened. They weren't alone. Minato was standing in shock. They started to look around the area, which had been completely abandoned, and the only things left of Asura were his necklace, his forehead protector, and a pouch containing his book. The first book ever written by Jiraiya. "Where is Sensei now?" They bowed their heads and handed over Asura's belongings as Ryu asked, surveying the area. "All right, his belongings are there, but where is he?" Ryu inquired, continuing to scan the area. "He didn't make it, he took all them out with him," Kakashi remarked. With tears streaming down her face, Kasumi remarked, "Why didn't he let us help him? He is always telling us to work as a team." Shin said, "Letting one person handle everything is sometimes the best teamwork," from the shade of a tree. Kasumi shouted at him, "Why didn't you do anything to help him? What do you think would have happened if we hadn't stopped you all and you hadn't arrived except for Jiraiya and Kakashi?" Aya inquired. Ryu remarked, "We would have helped him, no he would have had his attention split trying to fight them and protect you all and it would have limited the jutsu he could use," Aya sadly replied. "The truth is that any of us would have got in his way, none of us were on his level and he proved it." "How he is dead," yelled Ryu. "That is true, but he also took out 4 of the strongest ninja in the world by himself, 2 of whom were former Hokages," said Kakashi. Shin remarked, "So Orochimaru summoned those 2. To believe that he could defeat the first and second Hokage by himself." Looking back toward the battlefield, Aya remarked, "He is even more amazing than I thought." Before they returned to the village, Kakashi handed Asura's belongings to his team. Minato remained at the location, surveying the area and wondering, how can someone so young be so powerful? None of his team members talked to one another that night, Ryu said, glancing at the book his sensei was carrying. Emi gripped his forehead protector tightly as tears streamed silently down her cheeks, while Kasumi sobbed by herself in her room. Tower of Hokage Sarutobi, Jiraiya, Minato, and Kakashi sat and conversed. "Hokage. Sensei, I know Asura wasn't a part of our village, but I feel we should do something to honor his memory for all he has given us," Kakashi stated. "I agree, I think we should place his name on the memorial stone since he died in line of duty protecting our village in the process," Sarutobi stated. Minato got up and looked out the window. "I think we will do that and have a memorial service, invite the Hidden Moon Village to attend if they wish," she said. Naoko, on the edge of tears, said, "Daddy, "Is it true that a little blonde burst in the room, is Asura?" Minato said, "It's true, with regret. It's your fault he is dead, you were supposed to save him, you were supposed to be the strongest ninja in the world," she said to her dad. Minato remarked, "I wish I could have saved him, though." When Sarutobi said, "I don't think any of us could save him, he was dead long before we met him," she looked weak and exhausted. However, Naoko didn't want to hear that. She was crying and wanted to know why Asura was no longer here. After a week, Asura's team was named Chunin, but they didn't really care because they were still grieving for their sensei. They stayed in the Hidden Leaf village, where they were greeted by Asura's former teammates, a few members of Anbu, and some members of their village, the Tsukikage. Unbeknownst to them, a masked man in a black cloak with orange and gold flames was watching them. Kasumi searched for Shin and Aya, but they had not appeared and no one had seen or spoken to them since Asura's death. She felt resentment toward them and blamed him for their sensei's passing. "What did you achieve, and why did you go through all of this?" As she watched the man in the mask, Aya inquired. "It's clear that you didn't need us, so why did you bring us in on this?" Shin inquired. "I needed someone they would believe to tell them that I was dead," he replied. "Why do you think we're going to inform them that you're dead?" Shin asked, staring at the man in the mask. "Because you have only felt a small portion of my power, and once I take off this mask you will never find me unless I want to be found." "What's your name?" Aya inquired. "My name is Asura, but I've gone by a lot of names. It appears that Allies has retired. I would really hate to make my friends do something against their will, so will you comply with my request?" "Who are you?" Shin inquired. "I am whatever I need to be." At the funeral, down the Tsukikage was at the head of the group, with the third Hokage on his right and the fourth on his left, and Kakashi took the seat behind Asura's old team, ignoring the uneasy feeling that they were being watched. The third stood in front of them and said, "We are here to say goodbye to a hero, a man who took the burden of the world on his shoulders so that the rest of us could hope for a better tomorrow. When I first met him, he was at the memorial stone. When I asked him if he was looking for someone he had lost, he replied, 'Yeah, but I won't find their names won't be on here because no one has realized their sacrifice and no one but me will ever truly know.' I believe the same is true for him. I don't think any of us truly comprehend what he gave up so that he could pass away with his head held high to ensure the safety of not only his people but the entire world. No one should have to carry a burden, and he was glad to do so. People lined up to speak with him one last time, and he took a seat after saying, 'He was a true hero. He fought so we didn't have to. He died so we could live.' Sensei, I remember when we met, I hated you but now I consider you my best friend and I will truly miss you," Ryu replied. With a simple, "Sensei, I will miss you," Emi said. Tears were streaming down Kasumi's face as she said, "You truly are a bastard sensei. You didn't show you had a heart until the last moment. I never got a chance to tell you that I loved you, that I still love you." Shin said in a low voice, "You know you really are a bastard doing this to them. How can they miss something that was never there?" Asura they knew never excited. "It's just another allies, a clever mask to hide my true self," Asura replied. "There is no one but me who knows my true name, has seen my true face, no one can know my pain, and if someone does that is one lonely person." Following a series of respectful greetings, Asura turned to his friends and said, "This is goodbye. This is the last time we will meet," before teleporting away without a trace.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.